So call to order officially. It's 7 o'clock on the nose. May 19th. You ready, Fran? Thank you, sir. May 19th, Irwin K. Washburn Library and Media Center is the Carver Elementary School Building Committee. And we have a lot to cover once again. And we've got about 10 items on the agenda. Every little thing is counted here. And but I just wanted to start off the meeting and kind of make an announcement as far as protocol for the comments and questions from the general public, because I feel like last meeting went very long and we had planned on a 2.5-hour meeting, and just the way it happens ended up being 3 hours. So I'd like to, as chairman, it's my responsibility and my duty to keep it in, flowing and keep order. And so I would like to, we have a ton of people on the committee, which is great. And so we have a lot of voices, we've got a lot of opinions, which is wonderful. As far as comments from the general public, I still want them. However, I'd like to have more structure, and if people in the audience, like Andrew is here today, if you could write down your thoughts and what you'd like to say, and we'll save time at the end of the meeting to have you speak. And then, because we definitely want to hear everybody's voice, just I want to have some more control of it as chairman, so we can keep it smooth. So if you have questions or comments, please come. Please join us in the audience, but I would like to keep it more organized so we can, because we all are working hard during the day, every one of us, and this is a lot of work here too, which we signed up for. So that's what we're all about. We're going to do it, but just to keep it organized. All right? How's that, everybody? Anybody against that? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. That's right. I do. I do like to keep everybody included, though.
It also makes sense because there's a good chance that during our discussions, the questions might be answered, so leading it to the end makes sense.
Absolutely. I agree. So great. Thank you, everybody. And thanks, John. All right. So the next thing on the agenda is the minutes from May 5th. We're going to need a motion and a second, and then once we have that, we'll discuss anything, and then we can vote to approve. So do I have a motion?
Make the motion with the idea that we have any additions or omissions.
Okay, I got a motion and a second?
Second.
Great, so I got a motion and a second. Any discussion about the minutes? And if there is any edits, we're going to submit them to Kelly, just to make it easier. So, I think Dan, did you?
I already did.
Okay, great, so Dan submitted some edits to Kelly. And did anyone, Heather had some edits?
I have one minor one, and so I can give it to Kelly. Do you want it now, or? Do you want it now or at the end of the meeting? I can just pass it down to you.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you.
So maybe we shouldn't vote until everybody's seen the whole
Okay.
amendment one.
Yeah.
If there are other amendments.
I agree, because we got.
Just so it won't get confusing.
Right, and we want to really vote on whether it's accurate or not. And Steve, I'm just going to repeat something I said at the beginning of the meeting, and you weren't here, so I want to repeat it. And so I'll just say, because you're walking in, this is not about you, but I'm just talking about everybody, Steve. As chairman, I'm trying to keep more control over the meeting, so we can all get home at a reasonable hour. I let it get out of hand last time and end up being a 3-hour meeting. So we want the whole public to participate. We want your thoughts, we want your questions, but we're just gonna have all the public participants save it till the end, because we have a big committee here. And once you save your questions and thoughts, we'll definitely take them. And we're gonna, we'll have a reasonable time frame so we can all get home and get ready for our next day's work. All right, so that's on tape, and I won't repeat it a third time if more people come in. So that's, we're gonna table we had a motion and a second on, so what's the protocol for tabling this?
Motion to table.
All right.
So the question is, did other people other than myself have comments, or was it just me? If it was just me, it might be easy to just...
I had one, but I just passed it down
It was
to you as
minor,
well.
right?
Yeah,
I mean, I
minor.
can go over my minor changes. If nobody else has any other changes, it might be quick to just get
If
it.
they're minor grammatical changes, let the slide if there's anything of substance that I think we want to do them.
Yeah.
And that's my.
Mine was
I
just
think there
real
was some-
small.
Yeah, so they weren't grammatical, but there was some stuff that
Yeah,
we
I was
could
just
get
adding
over
a
with.
couple words to a sentence.
And I fixed a couple of words too. So I don't know if you want to, I can go over them real quick. There's one.
Yeah, let's do that, because it changed the tenor of your thoughts that you talked about last week.
So on section 8, on the review of the highlights of the Collins report, there was a sentence that said, look at the conditions of all buildings and get some options. If get some was supposed to be funding. So it was look at the conditions of all town buildings and funding options. So that was a correction to that. And then on the couple sentences down about the idea of going to the Collins Center, it was the lack of the master plan, the updated master plan that led to contracting with the Collins Center. So that was a correction that I made there. And then other than that, the last page, section 12, Roman numeral 12, about when I asked about the facade, I asked about the estimated lifetime of the facade. Because if you do new construction around older construction, one of the concerns is making sure that the older construction has the same lifetime relative to the newer construction. So those are the only corrections I made.
Great. You submitted those to Kelly, so she'll make the updates.
Yep.
And then Heather, your,
Can I just
Yeah,
borrow you?
sure,
So it
sure.
was just under the,
I think it was earlier.
it was real subtle, yeah, it was, under the communications ideas, it just had said Sarah was concerned about Facebook, and it was, Sarah was concerned about confrontation in Facebook. It wasn't that she was concerned about Facebook in
Right.
general.
Because Facebook's gonna help us, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great.
I'd like to make a motion to approve as amended.
Excellent. I got a
Second.
motion and a second. So any other discussion?
Just a quick question, under section 10C, at the end of that, it says, FYI, there are 2 wells at the current elementary school. And I'm just curious, did you mention that in the meeting? It just seemed odd, FYI.
I remember something about 2 wells.
Yeah.
I do too.
There are 2 wells here, but I don't know what point it.
Yeah, well, it just seemed weird.
I
Sorry.
think it was just confirming the comfort level
Okay.
of having a main water backup.
Okay, great. So we got the motion, the second, the discussion. No more discussion? So all in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. All right, it's unanimous. Great, thank you, guys. And let me just go over the agenda briefly, and then we'll move on to the meat of the agenda. So we're gonna start the evening off with a communications report from Heather. We have about 10 minutes devoted to that. And then after that, we're gonna get our report from Dave Siedentoff, and report on the meeting with the DEP that you guys went to. And then we're gonna turn to Sarah Stearns for a brainstorm, questions to be answered regarding the site selection. And then Sarah's gonna continue with the pros and cons, of all the different sites. And then at the end, I will talk about, the MSBA contact, and we wrap up with upcoming dates, possibilities, and then we'll adjourn. So we're planning on, about 9:15, so that's what I'm shooting for. All right, so let's keep going, and we're gonna do the communications report. I'm gonna hand it over to Heather Sepulveda.
So on May 9th, CCAT came in and we did an updated video of the elementary school. On next Wednesday, May 21st at 9:30, we'll be doing the editing of that video, so I haven't been able to see it. So I'll definitely have an update for you at our, probably the June 2nd meeting in regards to the video. Also, just, this is another quick one, our Facebook page, so back when everything happened around where I really got concerned during Sandy Hook, myself and another mother, we had started a Facebook page, and it was it was a private page, and it was to get people to be informed about, what was going on in the elementary school, and just a way to keep each other updated so everybody could kind of stay informed. I know, Sarah, you're on it, and you're on it as well. And so I changed it today to be the Carver Elementary School Building Project, so it doesn't discriminate against somebody who's not a parent, and we're trying to get it to not be a secret. It's private right now, and the reason for that was just to kind of protect whatever was being talked about in case it was about other people's children, but we're gonna be careful with what we put out there, so that would be open to everybody, so they can be on that page. So that was updated today. There was also a message put out there to remind people that that page was for updates, so they made sure they were in the right place. And then we updated the fact sheet. So it looks a little different from last time. This was definitely, I did a lot of updating after our first meeting. Dan, I know you had said it was a better idea to put the years the buildings were built, took that advice. Dave helped me out with a couple, updating a couple sections, and so these totals that are on here They're all estimated soft cost totals from Dave. He does them, is it yearly, Dave, that you do it, or?
Actually, the numbers have not been updated since the original, which was done, I believe, 3 years ago.
So this says 2014, I should probably change that to 2011.
That's when the original numbers came out.
Okay, so I'm gonna just make that change. So anywhere it says 2014, I'm gonna put 2011. Okay. When I thought about creating this fact sheet, I definitely thought twofold for the person who has no idea what's going on in the school or why we're going through this process, somebody who might have just moved into town, somebody who might be a new parent in this town, or their children may be new to the school system. So that's where the first part, I think, is definitely gonna be beneficial, as well as the picture, so they can understand why we're going through this process. The second part is for people who seen the pictures, the kids are here, they know what's going on, it's where are we in the process. So I definitely wanted the fact sheet to talk to multiple people in that regard. So that's why that second part is where are we in the MSBA process, and Liz helped me fill out this section with just what are the last steps, what have we done so far, where are we going, what's going on. And then in the end, if people have questions or they'd like to sign up to receive regular updates, they can email the buildingproject@carver.org, or they can stay updated through the social media on Facebook at Carver Elementary School Building Project. And then the next page has pictures. The next few pages, there is a lot of pictures that were taken. So if you feel like one of these pictures should come out, you're not happy with the picture, these are just initial pictures. I have a whole disc of pictures that we can look at. So if you feel like you want to see another picture on there, do you want to see more classrooms, is there something specific you're looking for, let me know, and I can definitely rearrange these pictures and change certain things. So I'm just definitely looking for feedback from all of you and what you think about the updated fact sheet.
Are all the pictures from the John Carver School?
All the
I
pictures?
can't see.
No.
Okay.
So do you think it'd be a good idea to update what building they're from?
I think so.
Okay.
Because, I think that some families with
No.
little kids are just focused initially on this building.
Gotcha.
And, they don't go anywhere near that front building
Okay.
for years.
No, that's a good point.
First two pictures are this building, the
This
rest
building?
are from the ground.
Okay.
And Heather, I would like to see some more pictures of classrooms in the EKW building. I
Okay.
know the first two pictures are the EKW, as Dave just mentioned.
But more
But
classrooms in
classrooms, just
EKW.
because I really want people to have visual of the lack of walls and doors.
Yep. Can do that. They're definitely on there. Like I said, there's so many, so it was more of what you'd like to see in here as well. I think that would be beneficial. Maybe I'll split it up by Irwin K. Washburn photos and Governor John Carver.
I just know from my experience, I
No,
didn't
that's a
step
good
foot
idea.
in the other building until,
Yeah.
I had a child in there. And
No, that's fine.
It was kind of shocking, and we were already, a part of this.
No, that's fine.
My other comment is, I'm wondering if we should put on the MSBA section just as a first statement with what it's all about, why we're working with the MSBA on this project for people who really don't have any background on, kind of going back to your point about people who are new to this process and aren't really aware of what's going, where this is going and why there's an involvement with a state agency.
So maybe I'll change that section to be, why are we working with and where are we in the MSBA process? Or
Yeah, just like
something
a
like that.
general,
Okay.
I haven't really read every item, but maybe you cover that, but just to explain
No, I
in
will.
one sentence.
Maybe we could put their website
On there too?
on there too.
That's a
If
good
people
idea.
wanted to know more about it, they just.
Right.
Okay.
Could also maybe reference the Collins report too, because that had a good summary of how the process works.
And so if I reference the Collins report, where can they view it?
That's a good question. I guess we need to get that somewhere.
Couldn't go on
We
the
can-
town website,
It
could it?
should probably.
I
Is
can
it on
also
the town
put it under the
website
building
already?
project.
It is?
No,
Under
could
the
it?
school
Oh.
website.
Could it? I don't know if it
I
is.
can put it, well, I can't put it on the town website, but I can put it on the school website too, put it on both places.
Yeah.
Then you can link it to
So maybe I can say like informational link section, kind of, and have the Collins report, the MSBA website,
Yeah.
the Facebook link, and then the email for the project. Does that sound good?
Yeah, I would add another section here that talks about, talk about the town meeting for the actual funding piece, but then the next meeting with MSBA is gonna be July 30th, and that's when they'll invite us in for the capital project, which means we'll start the cost share.
So where I have, once the local, I was afraid to put in dates just in case July 30th didn't actually happen, it was pushed off, but if you're sure that that's definitely the date, I could put once the local vote is taken place, the MSBA board votes at their July 30th meeting, you want me to write? Okay. To invite Carver into the MSBA capital pipeline for the cost sharing
Which
process.
opens up the cost sharing.
Which opens up the cost sharing process.
Yep.
Okay.
Even though we haven't confirmed the site yet?
Yeah, they don't need the site to give us money. They're gonna pay us to study the sites.
I just a quick question about some of these photos from the standpoint of, like the first one where we see ceiling tiles warped and falling from leaks and plastic to help with the leaks. Are we saying this, that the leaks, the school has a maintenance budget, so would leaks be fixed and these tiles be replaced? Or are we saying that you can't fix these tiles because you can't fix these pipes?
I was kind of viewing it as these are some of the common problems that consistently happen, but that was my view when I was looking at these
But that's why
photos.
you don't build the school because you have leaky pipes. If you can't fix the pipes are outdated.
Well,
It's
it all
code
comes
issues.
full circle to the point where the roof is out of warranty, we're not gonna put money into a roof.
So you're saying you can't fix the pipes because that brings the
Well,
roof
not
into...
pipe, but I mean, I have some roof leaks, we have some other issues that just lead into how far you can go. I mean, things aren't being let go to the point of safety issues, however, how much money do we put into certain areas?
Okay, I'm just a little confused between a maintenance issue and a really major building issue.
The roof is a major building issue.
Yeah.
We could say on it, due to extreme roof damage or disrepair or age, I don't know.
Just something that shows this is a significant issue, you know, versus someone say, oh, it's just a warped
So how,
ceiling.
what do you suggest as far as wording?
I don't know. Are we saying that the pipes cannot be fixed?
Is there a way to take because going along that, I sort of got that impression myself and was concerned when you flip to the next page, and I understand the premise of it, but when it looks at duct tape, it kind of gives the impression of poor maintenance as opposed to, you know, poor condition. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Like it's held together with duct tape, so that sort of looks like it's not being maintained properly, I guess would be the impression that I get. And is there a way to do what John's saying? I mean, if you're up on the roof, is it noticeably deteriorated? Is it something where a picture up there would be worthwhile from?
Well, I mean, if I see a major seam coming apart, we fix it. The problem with a lot of these EPDM roofs is where a leak comes out and the ceiling might not be right
Just
there.
goes
So you're
on.
chasing leaks, yeah,
Yeah.
they can trap.
Yeah.
So it's not always as easy as walking up on the roof and, okay, it's leaking here. If I measure out 20 feet, that's where the leak is.
So why don't we just say that the roof has lived its lifetime and it's structurally deficient?
Well, I mean, I
That
think
is
we
in need of totally
say that in the
replacement.
beginning, but it may be,
Causing these leaks.
what is it?
If we said, which is resulting in constant leaks or consistent leaks of ceiling
So
tiles.
the roofs are no longer under warranty and need total replacement. Maintenance is required for the roof and ceiling tiles affected by leaks.
Well, what happens with these roofs? You patch, you know, you put big patches in and then they just keep appearing, you know, elsewhere.
Yeah.
To the point where the membrane is. They only have a cycle life of about 20 years, 25 maybe.
So what maybe I should change, or think what you're looking for, John, is probably changing of the wording of these two to say, repeated repairs needed to ceiling tiles due to,
A roof that's reached its useful life.
okay, so let me just.
Just showing that's a significant
No,
repair.
okay, so let me just, what did I say? So I said, ceiling, tiles,
I mean, that's the result of it.
Continually damaged
continually damaged.
by decaying roof. A roof at the end of its useful life.
Okay,
And I have a thought also, you could just sit
Okay.
there. I like on page 1 to kind of tie the photos to the words.
Okay,
You have 1 through 8 here. You know, if we can get a photo that kind of relates to each number, you know, like the roof's no longer under warranty, or what type of damage is that causing? And what kind,
Gotcha.
we could correlate.
like I could even put the numbers, like number 8
Yeah.
in reference to it,
See
yeah.
photo on page
Sure.
2.
Or
Sure. Yes,
just
yeah.
to like condense it a little more, this is just an idea, have the photo with the statement underneath the photo, next photo, statement underneath the photo, if they're gonna correlate directly.
Okay, so change,
Sure.
maybe, okay, so.
I mean, I just think that if you're, so you don't have to flip
Yeah.
back and forth maybe, it's just
Okay.
the photo and
So the
the
picture
information is
underneath the
right
number.
there.
Yep,
And, you know, as an example, here's a photo kind
Okay.
of idea.
okay,
I'm pretty sure Will can pull out a few stills out of the movie of the roof too, if you want a picture
yeah,
of the roof, when they edited over at CATV.
okay. So, all right, I'll change the format to be,
Too bad we didn't get a picture when it completely collapsed right here and
Huh.
flooded though.
so,
That was before.
Because I like this at the front to kind of kick it off. I like it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you read it, and then when you turn to the next page, you can take, like, whatever.
but would you
Number
like it
1.
better to say, like, so we have point number 1, and then it'll be a picture of the outsides of the buildings. Number 2, statement, and then I have a picture of the heating and ventilation, any pictures associated with that. The electrical systems, I don't know if
I can work with you on that.
and then I'll have a picture under that. Do you like that structure better? Okay.
Well, I like a combination of the two. Like, I like the cover page.
Okay,
like the
but to
summary.
do
And
the
then
same
once we
thing
go
on
to
the
the page
second
2,
page? Okay.
Then you have.
Repeat it again?
Well, just take, you know, whatever, we'll say number 1, even though that's just talking about when the buildings were open. But say then, you know, you have number 1, and then you show a
Or we can
picture
watch it on
that
the outside.
is related to
Okay.
that.
Okay,
Heather, this isn't the size of the paper, but the 11 by 17 paper,
yep,
especially if we're using this at town meeting, it makes it nice if you have, like, the front page, you can open it up and do the pictures with the captions like this, and then just a factual review with links to other information on the back. You know what I'm talking about, my big 11 by 17
yep, yep,
paper.
okay.
So, and, you know, that might, like,
So
some
maybe
people
like
are
this is the
numbers
front
people,
page
some
and then
people are
11,
narrative
17
people.
is this.
Yeah.
On the pictures. Okay, that's fine. So I'll keep it 2. So I'll keep this front page, the structure the same, but the second page will become an 11 by 13 with numbers, what they are, and other pictures that correlate to the front. Does that sound good?
I would also, where you're citing stuff, I would just put an asterisk there and just put the asterisk at the bottom of the page versus repeating Dave did this in 1994, 1994, 1994. The parentheses is the first section.
Oh.
It's, you're
In
you're
2011,
properly
you
sourcing everything, but they're all the same source.
Yeah.
So an asterisk after each one of those and just bury the source at the end of the document.
Oh, okay.
Reducing words.
Yeah.
Sure.
Good footnoting.
So Barry, just a quick question. When should these numbers be updated? 2011 was a while ago, so if we're putting information out to the public
I
about
mean,
the...
at this point though, I think we're kind of, these numbers were just given as a source to the buildings are educationally and, you know, I don't mean structure-wise, safety-wise, but dysfunctional. So why do we really want to update these numbers when we're not looking at any of these as a standalone project is my question.
I think one good reason would be that if we're estimating the savings or the impact of the cost to the taxpayer, so if you're looking at millions and millions of dollars that have to be put into the buildings if we don't build a new or renovate, then you know, we need to, I think, let people know that those looming costs are sitting there pending. You know, if people thought that we had a couple $100,000 worth of maintenance, oh gee, that's easy, let's just do that. But if we're looking at millions of dollars, which these are old numbers now, so I'm sure it's gone up, that might be a bigger impact to people to say that we have to pay for it one way or the other. So are we looking at borrowing money to pay for millions of dollars of maintenance and to keep these existing structures going, or do we just save that money and put that into the new solution?
I mean, do we look at, to your
Let me,
point, do we look at rolling that number into an actual request of town meeting to have an actual third party come in and give us these numbers that are in the millions, so that...
I mean, my point, I think that's a waste of money. I think you're throwing money away to get hard figures that are gonna,
I would agree with that. I think that the numbers we have are orders of magnitude numbers. I think Dave is capable of giving an up-to-date estimate based upon his experience today, and use that as a baseline and say, okay, it's gone up 10%, 20%, whatever it is. But to go in and hire an engineer to come in and look at each one of those beyond what documentation exists for this facility is just throwing good money at bad. We know it's a problem, we know it's an order of magnitude. Is it $18 million or $22 million? Does it really care? Does it really matter?
Let me get Pat's thoughts too, he got it.
Just let me give you a quick history of this whole thing. We did this back in 2011, and Dave and I worked on it, and mainly Dave. And when we talk about these being soft numbers, the only thing that means is they're good, educated guesses, but we did not hire any types of professional engineers or so forth. Why we did this was for our 5-year capital plan, okay? Because we wanted the capital outlay committee and others to see this. If you look at our 5-year capital plan, all these costs, all these what we'll call soft costs, to deal with both this building and the front building, added up in 2011 to $21 million. At that time, that was in excess of what the share of the town would have been to the town's cost to have a brand-new facility. So you're gonna spend $21 million, you're still gonna have the same 2 old buildings, when you could spend $18 million and you could have a brand-new building. And as Michael said, what difference does it make if it's, we said it was 21. So what if it's 18? So what if it's 22 or 23? It's a big number. And we never updated it, because it was a soft number in the first place.
Well, can I make a motion to have Dave update the numbers to 2014 based upon what has changed since then, you know, over the next couple of weeks when he has an opportunity of doing that, just so we can say, okay, he's gone back and re-looked at it, and here's what he thinks the numbers are, without spending any money. But for your time.
I
All
second
right, I
that.
got a motion, I got a second.
Yeah.
Any discussion on that?
I just have a comment, it's not really a
Yeah.
discussion.
Liz?
But the core of why we looked at these individual costs was the King Scott feasibility study. They told us in 2006 what was damage beyond repair, what was infrastructure, what was, we just got to the electrical service that came up. It's hard to take a picture of the fact that the other building over there has electrical capacity of less than most people's homes, you know, so all these are based on an engineering study. So it's not like we made up the problem, we're just costing what the study told us was wrong. So I agree we should do it.
Did you have something, Mr. Ward?
Just that the numbers that we have available that we update should suffice.
John?
I was just gonna say, I know it's a much different example, but like on the Big Dig, right? Nobody knows, then you never heard the fact that it was $7 billion to repair the structure that was in place before they tore it down. Nobody ever talks about that, they just talk about, you know, and that would have made people's attitude look a little different, knowing you had to put $7 billion in and still look at that edifice up there. I think that's a similar, much smaller scale here, but I'm just saying, sometimes it helps people understand you know, that what you have is just, and what are you looking at? A 1950s structure there, and what are you looking at here? A 1950s, I mean, I was looking at this heating system you have here, I don't even think you can get parts for it. I mean, that's why it's taken.
That's
You
why
know,
it looks
fittings,
like
you know, the whole, it's just gone. I mean, no, let me ask, is that air conditioned up front?
No.
Yeah, so there's another example, I mean, you know, you know, there's no air control, I mean, it's just, so those are the things I think make it a much easier, I mean, if the idea here is to explain the value, what this gentleman mentioned about it's 20 million or 18 million or 25 million to repair what's here, it's really meaning, you know, it's, because you just can't fix it.
Right.
Right.
And just one final comment, are also, in all of those numbers, absolutely none of them have any sense of reimbursement to them. There'd be a zero reimbursement on any spending of that type.
Can I- Just a question, and there may not be necessity there for what it would involve, but there are 3, 4, 5, and 6 that don't have any figures associated with them. Would that be
Number 3 does.
worth the heating, the boiler, at least attaching some sort of estimated cost to that, or
Okay.
if that's beyond worth, Dave, I don't.
Okay, I'll look into it.
See, if you're gonna put them on the list, that would be worth, and everything else as a cost, it would seem to be
We have an
worth.
opportunity to figure out real costs, not right away, because we've got a leak in a cast iron boiler here. Okay.
Which I'm sure none of that's replaceable in
And
anything.
that's the other question, maybe things have changed from 3 years ago. You may have more things on the list now.
Oh, yeah, oh, I'm sure it's worse.
It could be
More
worse.
expensive.
And also, I heard
And,
21 million thrown out, and these don't add up to 21 million, so.
Right,
there's-
oh, there's more than that's on this list, this is a good
There's
peek
a
at it.
highlight.
Just a few
Yeah.
things down here.
And the
Mr. Ward?
budget is so bad that we can't even afford duct tape.
Right, right. That is,
We use the bubble gum.
So, just to kind of wrap up, so what I'll do is Dave and I will kind of get together, we'll go update these numbers to the 2014 numbers, maybe add numbers to 4, 5, and 6. I'll add the extra links for the MSBA website, a reference to the Collins Center report, asterisk down at the bottom to not repeat the parentheses. And then I'll kind of change the wording and update the pictures to know which building that they're from, and I'll also have them correlate to the numbers on the front. Does that sound good?
Barry, there was a
that's-
motion.
Yep, I gotta take a vote too. So that, I think that sounds great. And so we got a motion, a second. Any more discussion?
Just that Dave's gonna take him a good month to put that together, so no one expect it next week, because he's gonna put a lot of brain work into thinking this through.
Yeah, but not a month. Really, you serious?
We could, give him,
No, no, it's 2 weeks on next meeting.
Yep.
yeah, I just don't wanna put him under the gun,
Yeah.
because I mean,
I'll try that.
Yeah, we don't wanna put, I mean, seriously, don't, you know,
I will say the
Expect it
only thing
tomorrow.
is, we talked about presenting this at the town meeting, which is June 16th. So even if we wanted to present it, I'm assuming that you guys would wanna see it at the June 2nd meeting. The town meeting is June 16th, and the next meeting is June 23rd. So,
I'll have it for next meeting.
okay.
okay,
Not to
great.
put any pressure on you, I'm just suggesting if everybody wants to see it before town meeting.
And then if we have figures as of 2014, we'll use them, and then whatever we don't have, we have to use the most recent data, which would footnoted as 2011.
yeah, and just to give him more time, I'm comfortable with whatever figures he comes up with, so if those come out June 16th, and that's when they're available, I say we just let him run with those numbers, because we're not equipped to start to second guess them.
Right.
So whatever he comes up with, if it's the 15th or 16th of June, those go into print and run with
Yeah,
it.
and I have total confidence in Dave Siedentoff's work, so, I mean, he has proved it time and time again, and the whole facility's true. So,
Just a
John?
quick comment that, you know, getting everybody in town on the same page on the school, which is hugely important to us as a committee and us as a town. I think it's really self-explanatory. When you look at these pictures, you look at these general costs that Dave's come up with. I mean, how could you have any other opinion? You know what I mean? So I think that's really important, and I think this could be, you know, yes, it's very basic, but I think just about anybody without even reading anything could understand what we're looking at here and make the case for that we're really gonna do something and do it now. I think it's important. I think it's something that would help us, I think, in building consensus down the road. That's all. So it's a very basic thing, but I think it's there it is.
So you like the fact sheet?
I like everything you did.
All right, nice job. All right, so let's take that vote. So all in favor of Dave getting us those news figures, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's none, it's unanimous. Great job, all right, beautiful. Anything else, Heather, on the communications report?
No, I talked a little bit about the Facebook page. I'm still kind of, like I said, trying to make that a public, no longer a private page. I don't really know how to do it. I'm trying to fix it right now. But yeah, so, you know, by our next meeting, I'll probably have some information on the CCAT video. This will be as updated as I have it, and that's it.
All right, great, thank you so much, Heather.
Thank you.
Nice job. Okay, next, number 5 on the agenda, we have a report from Dave Siedentoff on the meeting with the DEP that you recently attended, along with others. So I'm gonna hand it over to Dave, and update us, please.
All right, I have some notes. Last Tuesday, May 13th, Michael Belinowski, Robert Tinkham, and myself had a meeting at the Southeast Regional DEP office with the Director, Deputy Director, and Enforcement Officer from the DEP. The purpose for the meeting was to get input from DEP on our considerations for a possible new school building on one of 2 existing sites. The outcome of the meeting was that neither the existing elementary school site nor the high school middle school site is absolutely prohibited by DEP from another building on each respective site at this point. What this means is both sites could potentially have a new elementary school built on their tracts of land. We already know a remodel of the existing elementary school buildings has been approved by DEP on their environmental impacts. So the B3 option has already been gone through the process with them. Engineered plans and their environmental impacts need to be presented to DEP for review and approval. Which site scenario works best for us as a district needs to be decided. So basically, at this point, they do not say that no, neither option is out at this point. There was a lot of brainstorming, a lot of good ideas by us and them. On the drinking water matters, at either site, we can possibly add additional wells to form a cluster well, a well cluster as they call it. A clustered well group has less of a footprint, which is a Zone 1 and Zone 2 impact, than separate individual wells do. You are piggybacking on the radius of the existing well. So basically, at this site, if we were to use one well, or at the high school site, you would add additional wells by an environmental study where they fit best. And that actually, by clustering, you reduce your Zone 1 and your IWPA impact areas. So it actually allows you to have smaller detection areas. That's an option for that, which is probably the best way to go, because what that also does is it gives you, you're not relying on one well per building.
And you mentioned that last meeting, you'd rather not rely on one well.
Correct, yeah, yep. And on the wastewater matters, we will need to relocate our SAS, which is our soil absorption system. We want it to be outside of the IWPA, which it is not now. If it's not, it will require more treatment, which equals more upfront and operational costs in the long term. So basically on our SAS, which is our discharge field, we want to get that outside of our IWPA.
Which site are you talking about?
That's at the high school site, and that's regardless of whether it's just a renovation of the wastewater plant or there's an additional building up there. One good thing is the SAS can now be buried underground, as before with our present discharge field that is above ground. So what that means is the SAS field can now actually be below a sports field on the site. So that's an area where you can bury it and have use. So that's good. We are presently permitted for 30,000 gallons per day discharge. This would probably cover an additional building on that site. However, there are other factors that need to be investigated as well. One thing that needs to be looked at is the DPW and the transportation really should look at being tied into the new wastewater plant. DEP views this as one piece of property, even though there are border lines per se. That being one piece of property, we should not have separate fields on that piece of property. So we really should look into that as well. The engineering needs to look at that. The engineering study needs to address that. Also, DEP is going to be issuing us an ACO, which is an administrative consent order in the near future. We'll probably expect to see that in the next few months. This translates into DEP will be looking for us to lock into a date to have a plan of action in place to meet our groundwater discharge permit that they issue to us. So they realize, we've been operating without one for quite some time now, and they're just looking for us to, okay, you need to have a plan, and you need to let us know what that plan is. So that will be coming, and that's regardless. That will be coming, whether and that's not a threat by them or anything. That's just it's time for it to happen, and we both realize that. So.
Barry, can I ask a
Yeah.
question? So they didn't mention any fines or anything at this time?
No,
No.
not at this time.
That's
They're
good.
just gonna come through with that ACO, and as long as we conform with their request, we'll be fine.
I'll give them a timeline.
Yes.
Yeah, and the timeline can coincide with all the work we're doing in studying alternative sites. It doesn't have to be done next week, it doesn't have to be done 2 months from now. It's if we're working towards a plan, and this is one of the options of the plan, that will suffice them as long as we're actively working for it, so there are no fines. Just a couple other points is again, what they're looking at is if we have a well that's 400 feet radius area that you have to do, and that's what you have to have for one well to draw this. If we cluster the wells, that whole area can reduce down to 225 and then have these little elliptics off of it, so we can actually take a well field that's currently in a sports field right now, and actually by clustering, move those further away. So the good news is that by doing that, it gives operational redundancy because you have 3 components there, and it has more flexibility with us to use the entire site. So from a well water standpoint, adding additional capacity, that would have no impact for building in one of those 2 sites that were located onto the middle high school. So I think that was another positive outcome that came out of this.
So I have another question. So they were only talking about wastewater for the bus barn and DPW.
Correct.
They're not talking about their wells.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
No.
And one thing, getting the wastewater out of there too would be if they were to tie into the new treatment plant, if there was a problem with a well at one of those sites, if one of those wells had to be relocated, it gives you more flexibility for those buildings as well.
In burying the SAS field, we said it could be done under a field. It's not done for irrigation, it's not like a couple inches down, it's like feet down, so that any type of affluent just goes right into the ground, it doesn't come up. It's just, it gives us a space to do that.
And this sounds like this is obviously an issue whether we do the elementary school there or not.
Correct, so this has to be done, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. They also mentioned looking at another alternative, which was the membrane
Yeah,
system.
it was newer technology. There's a new plant that opened in Pembroke.
Yep.
I believe the Lowe's in Pembroke, and it's called a membrane technology. Smaller plant. I don't know any of the logistics or anything of it, but these, technology has come a long way in every field, and wastewater is one of them. So the biggest thing I think is, and that'll all come on recommendations of an engineer, what type of plant we should put in. The biggest thing is we just want to make sure that SAS is outside of our IWPA, because if it's not, we have to do more treatment, we have to do more, it's going to be upfront costs and operating costs, the more mechanics you have in there. So if we can get that outside of the IWPA, that's a positive.
By using the membrane field, and we had one in the last town that I worked in, is your operational costs are actually lower because you're not using as many chemicals to treat the material. So that actually has some advantages down the road as well. And it's scalable where you don't have to have as many microbes. So in the summer, as we talked about, where there's not a lot of, stuff, if you're going in there for the bacteria to eat, is that the membrane, it can have, the capacity can change real quickly compared to this type of system we have right now. But again, all that was good news. Clearly, the town has to do something anyway, just because of the current plan. But this gives us some more flexibility going forward, and just allows either site or, to be looked at. Not that one's better than the other, it's just that these 2 items should not be a constraint to looking at either alternative.
Right. Mr. Ward?
Is there a big cost of piping the sewage from the maintenance buildings over to this?
That would have to be, obviously it'd have to be a pump system. We're not going to get a gravity that far, so it would require pump chambers and a
So there's a
forced
pretty
main.
good size expense on it.
Yeah. But that's something that we're now, before it was things were grandfathered in, some things continue to be grandfathered. One thing they talked about is it's not a black and white area. There are gray areas on certain things with DEP, but they want to make sure that you're definitely not lessening any of your environmental or worsening any of your environmental impacts. If what you're doing is not hurting, the protection area, or as long as you're not bringing the environmental issues worse than they are, they will look at what you're proposing and go from there. But at this point, out of these notes, I think we have some answers that we were looking for, but the next people that need to go back to DEP will be engineers on behalf of us with, okay, this is what we're proposing, and then DEP communicates with them. Pretty much, we've reached our limit.
Now you go professional.
Yes.
Dave, was your question pumping from DPW to the?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, is that gonna be an expense that this whole project is gonna incur?
Well, what I'm wondering is how much wastewater ballpark you think is coming out of the DPW?
Well, if they're on Title V fields, the DPW, I don't know. I know the transportation building, I have a 1,000-gallon tank I have pumped once a year.
So it's
DPW 's
probably not a
probably the
lot,
same.
they probably just,
No.
okay. So in a case like that, for the pump chamber and so on, that's not a big number. For a small pump chamber with a macerator in there, 2-inch force main, up to, the ultimate plant that you're doing. So I wouldn't be afraid of that, that's not gonna be horrible.
Yeah, we're not putting in big infrastructure, it's one of those flexible hoses.
No, it's very, very straightforward, we use them all the time, sometimes you use them on a single-family house. Because the house might be,
At least I'm not talking big bucks for adding to this cost.
No, it'd be different if you were putting 20,000 gallons through it,
Yeah.
but it's for a couple of toilets and showers or whatever, it's nothing.
To tie that in, though, it wouldn't be part of the elementary school cost, it would have to be a town cost to pump them in, because MSBA wouldn't participate in that type of item. Which gets to your next point, is that when we go forward and start to study these alternatives, that's when we'll start to have the engineering analysis that'll go back to DEP with, based upon this input, we can start to put a scope of work together that they'll be able to look at these items, and then MSBA will be able to participate in paying for, and come back with alternatives for this location.
So that sounds like a good segue. It sounds like the Carver team has done everything it can.
I just have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm
No,
right next
it's
to you. You
okay.
go first. You ask your question.
I just wanted
Thank
to ask Dave a point of clarification on the idea to cluster the wells. That's an option at both sites, either
Yes.
site?
Yes.
That was it.
Excellent, thank you. I just gotta want you
No, that's okay, I was looking.
wave your hand better. All right, so I'll be more alert to that. So I was just asking, sounds like we've done what we can as a team from Carver. You kind of hinted that somebody else has to look a little further.
Yes.
Is the next step choosing an engineer?
Yes.
And if so, is that something we want to do tonight, as far as recommending?
Would you put it out to bid, is that what you?
Yeah.
Well, we have some options too.
We have to develop a scope of work.
And plus, we've had an engineer in the past kind of look at stuff too.
If I could, at the last meeting, we talked about that we're setting a precedent here, and it's in the minutes, and anything we do, the public needs to know we're getting the best price, and everything should go out to bid. I do think we should put together a scope of work, but I do think it's premature to put that out to bid right now, because that means we're paying 100% of the cost. If it's part of the feasibility analysis that MSBA approved, they will pick up a portion of that cost as we start to look at the site constraints for the property. So these are all the types of things as part of the engineering design that we can ask them to participate in, and I'd rather use someone else's money where possible before we go forward and do this. But having said that, we can start to put together a scope of work. I think that going forward and just hiring a firm without going out to bid, I don't think is setting a good precedence for the committee. And we should go to MSBA and advocate with them that they pick up part of the cost for this, once we're invited into the capital pipeline.
Barry,
And then, Liz?
so, a long time ago, probably 3 months ago, when I was doing all the other paperwork for MSBA in March, I was having a conversation with Diane Sullivan. I said, if to determine how much money we need town meeting to approve, would it be allowable and reimbursable if we went ahead writing the scope of work, hiring? And she said yes, because anything that contributes to answering the feasibility part of the question, that they would reimburse, whether or not we've been invited, if we're invited into the capital pipeline. If we weren't invited in, then of course they wouldn't. But, so prior work, as long as it's something different and new that we did, they would reimburse us if we go forward at some other time. We have a lot of information on our wastewater treatment, because we did a big engineered study on the plant, so we can base how we write the request for proposals based on that work. So we're in a really good place
Okay.
to, if we decided, otherwise I don't know how we're gonna know how much money we have to ask for.
Right.
I have a question, actually. This ACO that the DEP is gonna discharge you guys, is there like a deadline on that?
No, they're just they're gonna issue that, and they'll probably, at that point, they're gonna request us to come up with a timeline.
Okay.
And showing them, all right, we're gonna,
That you're at least working on getting it
yes,
done?
we're working on it,
Okay.
and they'll probably want us to come back. They'll probably have a target date with us to come back with plans. And I don't know whether there'll be engineered plans, I'm sure that language will be in the
Okay.
administrative consent order, to tell us, you know, what we have to adhere by. So as long as we meet those, and it's not gonna be within 6 months you need a new plan. That's not the way they work. So they just want to, all right, we've been in park a long time, so we need to start inching forward. We're not gonna go from park to 100 miles an hour. They'll work with us.
Any other thoughts? And do we need to know a site soon? Because we have.
Can I go back just to the study?
Yeah.
I just would like to ask the committee, what would be the harm in starting the work on the RFP? Because even though it seems like a long way away, and July 30th will be here, and these are very time-consuming, I think this could be a small cost that would not require extensive procurement. But so I think that if we could start off with what the RFP is, then we could put it out, and people begin to respond, and we could figure out how, I just hate to be sitting still if we
Right.
don't have to be.
Yeah, because I'm getting nervous too with the July coming around the corner. So,
So it sounds like we need some clarification from SBA as to what they will fund for the July 30th. But I think the more fundamental question for the committee is we don't want to start piecemealing things. This is something that needs to be done. I think everyone will agree if we can use other people's money to help defray the cost, we should. I think our first order of business is to formalize our discussion we had last week on procurement. And that is, are we gonna procure things, or are we gonna handpick vendors to do it? If we're gonna procure it, do we wanna send up a procurement committee or a selection committee or, a committee to start to put together RFPs so that work can be done behind the scenes to move some of these elements forward? And I think that is going to set a good precedent for the whole project, that we're doing this in an open, transparent process to get the best price we can for the community. So maybe that should be our first, before we get into the details, should we do this, should we not do that? Let's talk about the big picture, let's talk about process.
Well, we're required to do procurement,
right.
so
Not necessarily, for engineering work, you're not, depending upon what type of engineering work it is.
right, but through the whole MSBA process, there are thresholds for which they require us to do procurement. So there are not many thresholds that don't require it. Small studies, we don't have to. And I'm not really trying to put cart before horse, but what I'm thinking is this is something we could be working on. If it's a small committee, that's fine. To get to where we need to be, because every single day, we're spending more money on all three buildings now. And every single day, the cost of construction changes. So we can't spend too much time not doing anything. And as long as we follow all the procurement rules that MSBA has, we're set. And it's all in there, everything, module 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I'm just saying, if we want to procure this, somebody wants to be on a committee, we can write this up. I suggest David's on the committee. Because, we have been studying this wastewater for about a year now, and we have a lot of information that we can give to anyone that would want, any firm that would want to do it. I don't see a reason not to start the process.
I agree. So maybe the suggestion is to start to create a separate procurement committee, is what we're looking for. Is that what you're looking for?
Step one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's two things. One is the procurement process as it stands. I mean, I'm also supportive of putting together an RFP and starting to put that scope of work, that needs to happen. But that's one element of, we're gonna be repeating that many times through this whole process. That's why focusing on the process and the procedures is, are we going to bid everything out as we discussed last meeting? If we are, this is how we're going to do it. This is the procedure, so that everything is above board. I'm not saying there is anything above board, but let's just take the high road on all this. You know, I think that there also is some clarification that we need to get from MSBA as to when will they open the spigot. Right now, there is no project.
Right.
So any prior work that was done before today, from before, they're willing to participate in when we get to a certain point. But between now and when they invite us to have a project into the capital pipeline, will they support any type of reimbursement after that? Then the other piece is, we're gonna hire an owner's project manager, an OPM. Don't we want the OPM to be involved in reviewing the RFP before it goes out for this piece of work? Because they're gonna be responsible for overseeing it. I go back to, if we're gonna be working on any RFP and any scope of work, the first thing we should be doing is focusing on the OPM scope of work, so that come July 30th, when we're invited to come in there, the next day, we have a draft scope for OPM that goes up to MSBA, so they can start to review that and release that right away. But, you know, we really need to follow a good process in here to make sure that everything is done in the appropriate steps. And I'd like to have the OPM on board to oversee this work. That's the expert we're hiring.
They prefer for us not to get the OPM until after the 30th.
They won't pay for it if we do it before that.
Exactly.
So I don't know how they won't pay for that, but they'll pay for this. That's just a question we need to ask.
Right, well, I did ask it, and that's the answer I got. It never hurts to ask again.
Right. But don't we need a site also before we go forward with all this stuff?
Not at all, because that's what they're gonna pay for, is for us to analyze the multiple sites and the multiple iterations of B3. So if we change B3, they'll pay for that. If we look at a new and different site, they'll pay for that feasibility study. Looking at the water and wastewater as part of a new site is part of the feasibility analysis. So again, I don't want to use Carver's money where we don't have to, and I want to use the state's money. And if we have to wait till July 30th before they start opening the financial spigot, then we tee everything up, so on August 1st, we're ready to go.
Liz, is that contact someone that would be willing, if it's her word that we're putting that on, to put that word in writing, or is there a clause or something that she has that we do?
Diane Sullivan's the public relations manager, but eventually we'll get a project manager. Now we have a project liaison, Katie Loeffler, but if, they would definitely, if there's money, go put it in line.
So, basically, to kind of wrap it up, right now, from DEP's eyes, there is nothing that says option A, B, or C is off the table. So,
Okay, good.
obviously, looking at the engineering studies will give us, okay, we might be constrained at this site because of certain environmental issues. We might be constrained at the high school, middle school site because of certain environmental issues. That should be a piece of the pie we look at overall as to where we want a site choice for a building. But it's not going to be the leading factor, I don't believe, in our site selection.
That'll help us make a decision though.
Yes. Yep.
Which, 2 months ago, we thought it was gonna be the leading factor, because we thought the two sites may be prohibited
Yeah.
because of the water issue. So,
So that's good news. There are more options. Mr. Ward?
So, should we be starting an RFP and at the same time working out a procurement process?
Well, there's a process we have to follow for procurement. So it has wiggle room. If it's under a certain amount of money, you can do this. If it's over a certain amount of money, you can do that. And Pat and Dave and Michael understand that. But I think we're information gathering. That's what I'd like to be doing, is gathering all the information we have. I still don't know how we're gonna determine how much money to ask the town for a feasibility and schematic if we don't have a little bit more information. That's my fear, is that it won't be good to go ask the town for a certain amount of money and we run out, or we ask for a whole lot more than we need and then people get mad at us. So I think the more information we have, an engineered study can tell us how much the costs are gonna be.
So when does that timeline fall down? If June 16th is the town meeting, when is the last time we can put that number up?
Well, I don't know if there's an end date, but,
No, just
but I'm
giving as
just
much
curious on
time as we need.
how we're going to determine, I'm really curious, Michael, how much money do you think we're gonna need?
No, that's a good question. When we had our meeting with MSBA, I think at that point, we were talking, we might need about $150,000 more. They said go for a little higher in case you need that. And what I was gonna propose to the selectmen to put as the article is that right now in our building stabilization fund, there's $581,000 in there. And since we have that money that's for capital projects, for both the school or the fire station, and because we're looking at redefining how the capital stabilization fund is created, so it picks up both buildings and also capital outlay, is as we move forward in the new process, to take that $580,000 and to split that up between both the school and also the fire station, because both projects need to go through some significant design, engineering, feasibility analysis, matching money from MSBA, or at least the fire station, that's all town money. That money would allow us to jumpstart the project without going out and borrowing money right now, because we have cash in hand. So why go out and borrow money if we have that already set aside for this? This would allow us to jumpstart both projects. We may not need all that money, and that's okay. But at least we have it to get going, and that's where MSBA was looking at, was to have that. So what I would be proposing is that we go forward with $290,000 for the school and $290,000 for the fire station to move that forward. Again, the fire station is pretty clear what that is. Now the school is that we already have some money set aside already. And that, you know, as long as we watch those figures appropriately, and that's why I'm a big advocate of procuring everything on this project, even though some things are exempt, you know, and you can, and there are ways of getting around the procurement law. I advocate for this big public project that we procure everything.
So, I think there's a tiny little piece of information missing with the big cost. Is MSBA is looking for us to vote the amount, the total amount of money, not less what they'll reimburse us, for all of feasibility and all of schematic. It's been that most people's experience, it adds up to about $850,000. So whether we take it from stabilization, which, you know, if the town is willing at town meeting to do that, that's great. But they're looking for us at town meeting to approve that total amount of money, where our source they don't care about. So we have 101,000 left in schematic from which the first appropriation. But even with 290 more, that's not gonna get us 850.
I'm not advocating it's gonna be $850,000 to get us to where we need to be. And that's a number that it should not cost us to get to that point. We no longer have to do a needs assessment. We know what the issues are. We know we have to build a school. You don't have to re-spend that money. This will get us to the point to get us through MSBA with the capital project to get the project moving forward. Yes, we will have to reallocate those other funds.
I just really disagree, because the needs assessment was just a tiny piece of asking people in the buildings what the needs were, and we know what we need. You're right, we don't have to redo that at all. But we're talking about drillings, borings, how much is it gonna cost to clear the trees from wherever we do? It's going to be a very big expense, and then schematic is actually designing the preferred design, and that does cost a lot of money. So I just don't think that much money will get us where we're going, wanting to go.
John Carter.
Just ask a question. Are we looking really at a sum of money at town meeting that we go forward with a feasibility study on site selection so we know where we're gonna put this project? And then when it comes down to the big numbers, which is 800,000, aren't we really looking at a special town meeting to come back? What's the turnaround time on a feasibility study on site selection? If we're not gonna do it until July, we might not get it back for August, September, right? So aren't we really looking at October, November special town meeting to say, hey, we can do the site here or here? Hey, now our number's gonna be $700,000?
Well, this is exactly was what I was trying to point out is MSBA, in order to vote us into the capital pipeline, we have to have a community vote for both feasibility and schematic design. So I asked the question, what if we spend ahead of the vote enough money to figure out the feasibility part of just actually building one site or the preferred site? Would you reimburse it? The answer she gave me that day was yes. If you go forward and vote the full amount for schematic design. But in order for us to get to the July 30th meeting, we have to have the full amount voted. Now, we don't have to go to July 30th. We can go to a different meeting. So that was, my first advocating was to get the feasibility part done so that we know what when we're site selection, we know what each is gonna cost. But they're not gonna approve 290,000 plus 100 as our total amount to go all the way through schematic design. They won't approve it.
But when we get to that phase, will they, now we're ready to go schematic design, will they take this money we're spending now into the pool when it comes time for reimbursement rates?
She told me that whatever we spend figuring out where to put this building would be reimbursable with feasibility, because we're doing a new feasibility study.
And the clarification we need to ask from MSBA is that before or after we're invited into the capital pipeline? And we just need clarification. I'm not saying one's right or wrong, just we need clarification on that. I think the other piece is that as you start to look at the feasibility of the alternative sites, you don't have to spend another $800,000 to do that. Because you have the programming, you have the basic information to put together through the schematic process. And I just cannot envision ever needing to spend $800,000 to get us through the schematic piece of this.
The 800,000 is both feasibility, which cost us 257, and you said, like you said, we paid for some educational programming parts. We don't have to do that part over. We know what we want. Our needs really haven't changed, do you think, Ruby?
No.
No. We know it'll be a slightly smaller building. That's all we.
Numbers.
Yeah, numbers. But it will definitely cost $600,000 to do schematic, because it's detailed design, permitting, all of that kind of thing. And what MSBA is looking for is the total amount we're gonna spend to get us to design build. In Carver, we separated that vote the last time, and it didn't work. And that's what they're really afraid of. So they really redesigned their whole process, because they've had a few that separated after feasibility. So they want us to have that upfront vote to take us through all the way through design build to vote for the actual project.
Show our commitment in the town,
Right.
town meeting. Dan?
So we have several unknowns, so it seems like we really can't take much of an action tonight until we get them resolved. So what actions, is there anything we can start? If not, then what do we need to get clarified so at the next meeting we can act on?
How do you get those clarified?
Well, I will call MSBA and ask them.
So we have to,
They're
Well,
8 hours a day.
yeah, I mean, it's important that we get this response in writing, so I think what we need to do is frame our question, so there's no confusion on interpretation. And the first thing that we need to ask them is, will they pay for any new work being done before we're invited into the capital pipeline on June 30th? That needs to be determined. The second is that, based upon where we are at the process right now, what money we have in hand, and the reimbursement that we'll be getting from them, is $290,000 enough to get us through the design and schematics that they want us to do as part of the capital, being invited to the capital plan that's there. I mean, I think those are the two fundamental questions that we need to get clarification in writing from MSBA. Because my recollection's a little bit different, and I'm not saying I'm right, I may be wrong, but I would feel uncomfortable without having that in writing, that this is gonna come, because it directs which way we go. In the meantime, what we can really focus on, and what I think is critical, is the OPM. We really need to, we can download their OPM, draft RFP off the site, we can tailor that to Carver, and we can have that ready to go come August 1. That needs to be the focus in order to keep this project moving, in my estimation.
If
And
we
it's-
get invited.
It's module 2 in your book. It's
Heaven.
the whole
Module 2 tells us all the details, right?
of the OPM process.
The
Okay.
RFP,
Yeah.
we talked a little bit about it before, was having a procurement committee, so I'm just gonna kind of go back to it. So creating an RFP for an OPM sounds like maybe something that we should have a procurement committee for, is that right? And then they can come back and we can all vet the RFP proposal. I mean, I think it's a good
I think it'd be a
idea.
great idea.
So is that something that maybe we can start to do tonight, just to kind of get some
Yeah.
things in motion, at least start to create a procurement committee?
I think the committee should take a vote as a policy of the committee. My recommendation would be is that everything we do, we procure. And we put out and we try to get competitive bidding on.
But who's
And I
gonna
think
work
that
on
starts the
RFP?
process, that then that's a policy of the committee. And then we form a subcommittee,
That's what I'm looking
people
for.
that would actually follow that committee policy to make that happen.
Did you have your hand up?
I thought we did that in the last meeting. We voted to go through the bid process.
Well, we talked about it and everyone's in agreement.
We didn't take a
Yeah,
We
vote.
didn't vote on it,
Yeah.
and then it's on the agenda tonight to
Yeah.
take a vote on an engineering firm, which was different than we discussed.
Okay.
So I'd like to make a recommendation that from the committee as a policy, the committee agrees that it will procure and get competitive bidding on any elements of this project as we go forward. And that the chairman will keep track of the finances of the committee.
Excellent. Add that to the plate, I will be happy to keep track of the finances.
So
Is that something that I'm,
That's the business
that is
manager does
Pat,
that.
yes.
Well, Pat does the work, but just someone on the committee overseeing that too.
Yeah,
That's all.
we'll
Is
work
that,
together.
is that a
Pat.
motion?
Oh, I don't,
Second the motion for discussion.
no, I can't.
No, I
He's not even gonna be here.
So we
so
got a
it can't be
motion, we got a
that.
second.
No.
Now we have some discussion.
My point goes back to something else. Let's finish this.
All right. So we have a motion, we have a discussion, we have a second?
Well,
I'm
Mr.
not,
Rogers?
can you repeat the motion? I'm not sure.
Yeah, want to
Sure,
summarize
the
that?
motion is, my recommendation for a motion is the policy of the committee that we will procure all activities with as related to this project, including securing competitive bidding where, as necessary. I'm sorry, not what necessary. We want to make sure that happens, that we do get competitive bidding.
Second. So we got a second first and a second, motion and a second.
seconded already.
All right, Mr. Ward, you're up.
Well, that little camera there, I want people out there to know that we're trying to do the best we can on all the expense items on this school. And I don't, that would be a way that we can tell the people out there that's what we're doing.
That's a good point, Sarah.
What's the downside? Losing time?
Downside. How much time are we gonna lose?
Well,
Yeah.
procuring, if you're procuring small items, like say under $10,000, you really don't even have to do a procurement, but we should anyway. If you're going under 25,000, you can, you don't have to do a time-consuming advertised sealed bid. You can basically make phone calls, you can do it by email and so forth, so it can be very, very quickly. And if anything is going to be going above a $25,000, we'd certainly, it would be incumbent upon us to do a formalized competitive bidding. And we probably have to, like for the OPM, obviously we have to.
So there are different variations of procurement?
Right.
Okay.
There are different variations, and there's some things that are exempt from procurement. Some engineering work is exempt.
Mhm.
By this motion, we're saying we're gonna procure that as well. Even though it's exempt and you can pick XYZ company, we're still gonna go through the process of getting competitive bids. Because it's exempt doesn't mean we have to advertise it and put it out for a 6-month procurement process, we can still pick 3, 5 companies, put a scope of work out, and have them submit based upon that to streamline it. So it's really, the main purpose of this is really just to get more competitive pricing and more transparency.
And not being from the public sector, I have a question, as a citizen, from whoever knows, Mike, anyone, Liz, Pat. Do you suffer when you just get the lowest bidder? Do you suffer quality at all?
Depends. Sometimes you do, and that's where you come back with qualifications, and sometimes you weigh out the qualifications of a firm versus the lowest price.
Okay.
And you do have the ability, depending upon how you put together the RFP, to do that.
Scope of work and the specs become very important.
Okay.
Or else you might fall into that.
Yeah.
that situation.
We don't want to be long, obviously, we don't want to be
Making a
longer than
phone
that.
call and say, company XYZ, come down and study this for me,
Yeah.
you're just opening a Pandora's box for cost overruns.
The operative word is lowest qualified.
Excellent, key word. All right, good, thank you, guys. All right, so we have more discussion. Pat?
One more time?
No,
Yeah,
you need a vote.
one more time. Can you just say that one more time, Mike, because the motion one more time.
Change
We can
it
play
every
the
time.
tape back.
It's the policy of the committee to go forward and get competitive pricing for the most qualified bidder on all elements of this project.
All right, great.
Let's summarize it.
That's good. And then Pat, did you have one last word?
I'm still want to go back to something else.
Okay, we'll get to
Sorry,
that.
was-
So we got the motion, the second, good discussion. Any other discussion? All right, so all in favor of this policy? Is that an aye?
I'm not
All-
voting.
All in favor, say aye. Great. Aye. Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. All right. And so now, Pat,
Okay, now I want to go back to discussion we were having before about the schematic design and so forth.
yeah,
So in voting a number for the schematic design, and we haven't heard any discussion about, we already have a schematic design in place. We've spent $500,000 on it. And then, when you're talking about designer selection and so forth, this is a big issue. Because $290,000 might be enough if it's the same designer already using a $500,000 design that they've already come up with. Needs a little tweaking now and so forth, but if you're starting off entirely from the beginning, and if you're gonna bring a new design firm in, that design goes away, and there's gonna be a new design by somebody, and then we're into the $500,000 or $600,000 range again. So I think that's gonna be clarified.
Sure, and that was part of a discussion that the four of us had when we went to MSBA on that. And their position was the town owns that data. The town owns that $500,000 study. The $500,000 study has to be changed no matter what, because that's the previous proposed project, and it's being reduced in size. So that information, engineer A, B, or C, or architect A, B, and C should be able to pick up that information, build off of that as to what other alternatives exist. Now, as we go through this process and we start to use some of their design feasibility money, we're not going to design 4 buildings up to the level of sophistication that we have right now. We're going to be looking at them more from a global standpoint as, what are the size needs? Does it fit here, there, and elsewhere? And then figure out what the pros and cons of that are. So MSBA,
You have to take 3.
yeah, MSBA was advocating that that's our work, that work belongs to the town, and any design engineering firm will be able to piggyback on that without starting over.
Part of my concern is if a new designer comes along, are they gonna wanna inherit somebody else's design? I'm not so sure about that. The other thing is that design is only good if it's B3 here, period. That's all it's good for. So if it goes on another site or it goes someplace else, that design is useless.
Right, but we never got to a real design, we were in schematic. So it's not like it's 25% design that you can go out and get a bid for. It's still in a schematic standpoint, where you're not measuring out
But we also
in
spent,
doing the heat
we also
loads.
spent $500,000 on it.
I
So-
spent a lot of money to get to that point for the program of it, yeah.
And if it's not used, it's $500,000.
No,
So
well,
it's-
no, MSBA
It's
has,
about
was
600
clear. that-
pages of information,
Yeah.
so it is very
It is a
detailed.
design.
It is very detailed.
Yeah.
MSBA will reimburse us for the work that was previously done for the previously proposed project, once we move this project forward. But they won't do that right now, until we get to Module 3.
So,
John?
I just wanted to clarify
Yeah, I'll be right with
the
you.
cost. When we went to MSBA, I asked them if by some chance we went ahead with B3, that we had 100,000 in the bank, so to speak. And then it was, you know, a big time estimate, not based on really a lot. 150 more would get us to project design. So that the most we would probably have to spend on B3 would be 250, but most likely a lot less. Because they've changed a few things, but not many. So it's not like the difference of 150 and 850,000. It's just that, for that 150, if I portrayed that to be the cost of a whole new one, I didn't mean to. It was just to go forward with B3.
B3,
I just wanted to
original.
clarify that.
Okay, so if it's another site, it's gonna be more, most likely. John?
Well, regardless, I mean, the money's spent, it's done. I don't think I don't think this committee wants to be wedded to any one idea, one way or the other. I think we have to look at what's best. We just found new information today from DEP that says all 3 sites are viable for all types of alternatives, which wasn't the case when B3 was developed, you know, in some prior committee. I just don't, you know, to me, I don't think that should jade what's best for this project, one way or the other. If we can suck out some information that's usable for all 3 projects out of that, great. If we can't, well, that's the way it is.
Mr. Ward?
I'm looking at you got 3 columns. I'm sure Sarah's gonna lead us through a discussion, but that 500,000 is gonna be a savings segment of the B3 plan. But there are gonna be other savings in the other 2 categories, and when we get all done, we're trying to come up with the most sensible total bottom line. So that may be something that is balanced, and we just don't know what that is yet, or how that balances up. But it's a factor that we know is right there, Pat. You brought that to our attention, that's for certain.
But the bottom line could be different,
Yeah, yes,
is
oh,
what
yeah.
you're saying.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's what
No,
I'm trying to
that's
say, is, you
gotta
know,
keep-
we don't know what the final
Yeah.
analysis
Open
is.
The point
minded.
is that, you know,
Right.
is that gonna be, are we asking for enough? That was my point.
Yeah.
And that, you know, never did anything either, but if we go in and ask for a certain amount of money and it's not enough,
Yeah, yeah.
then,
Right.
you know,
So-
it's,
So an estimate's based on this B3 project, but if we were going to move to another site, then it's potentially much more expensive. Will town meeting have approved enough for us to be approved by the MSBA? I mean, if we can't approve everything at town meeting and it's short of one of the dollar figures we need, then MSBA will say, well, congratulations on the vote, but it's not enough to get into the pipeline.
So that's why we're gonna get that clarification from the MSBA. So those 2 questions, I think, once we get those answered, then we'll be able to know for sure what that number should be for town meeting.
Correct, and also the other piece is we work with MSBA to put together the scope of work and what the designer's going to be doing once we get OPM on board. So we'll work within the budget that's allocated, and that's what we'll do to get to the answer to move the project forward. And once we get to a final decision on this is the project that we want to go forward with, then that's when we'll come back, and this is Q7, is the final project, whatever you want to call it. And that's where then we'll have another town meeting to fund the full architectural design of that and the cost to build it. And that'll be that additional vote there. So
Yeah.
let me,
Go ahead.
you know, kind of getting us action items here, is I have 2 items that we need to get clarification from MSBA in writing for, and Liz and I can work on doing this together, is that we're gonna be asking them is will they pay for any new work that's done before July 30th and being invited into their capital plan? And the second is a budget of $290,000 to move us through the schematic design phase plus the existing money that we already have allocated to this project, do they feel that's adequate to get us through that module?
Okay.
Those are the two
Feasibility and
questions.
schematic. Feasibility and schematic.
Yeah,
Feasibility
feasibility and
schematic,
schematic.
yeah.
And Liz, you had a point?
So, I think prop design, we keep using, it's just important to say that there's feasibility, it's exploring your options, which narrowing down your options. Then when you move from feasibility to schematic design, you move forward with your preferred option. There's a big conference with the committee and MSBA, and they beat you up a little bit. Why did you pick this? Why didn't you pick that one? Okay, so then when you move from feasibility to schematic, you're only working on one option. And that's when it gets very, very detailed. And then at the end of schematic is when you have the project scope and budget with MSBA and the second vote of the entire project cost. And your OPM, your designer, and MSBA cost it out. And then the three of those three triangulate the data to come up with the amount of money. It's never the cost of the building, because then you get to bid all your items, but you have to vote for this very large number. And that's the way it has to be. And because schematic is just so detailed, if we go with a brand new project, it is just gonna cost us a lot of money. And that's, that's what, we have to make sure this first amount of ask gets us all the way to design build.
Correct.
So will you guys be able to, one of you would be able to ask those questions before
Yeah.
June 2nd?
I think we can
This
go
week.
get that done. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, so let's keep moving then, because now we're over my schedule here. 8:30. And the next thing on the
You know what, I
agenda.
gotta go back to what Liz just said, because she just articulated very well, is again, our next phase after being into the capital pipeline is we're gonna study the feasibility of several alternatives. Of those alternatives, one we're gonna pick as the preferred alternative, and that's where the schematic money is gonna come into play, where we're gonna spend a lot more money, where the detailed work happens. So we're not gonna be studying schematics for 4 different options. At that point, we're gonna be on one preferred option, and that's where you get into the level of detail. That, when you go back and look at the old report, you compare B3 to all the other options, you can just see the level of information that was in that versus the other ones that's there. So,
All right.
But I do want to be clear, I think we're gonna spend more money on feasibility than we did before, because we're studying 3 different sites. Because to study it adequately, you're gonna have to do all those feasibility tests.
Yeah.
I'm just very worried about the bottom line, because we can't have 2 asks.
And this is good that we have, I see varying points of view. I want to hear all the views because we got to get to the bottom line being the best. So this is good that we're having a,
The other comment I want to make is I don't
Robust
think the
discussion.
voters are gonna forget that they spent $757,000. It may be water under the bridge, but there may be a lot of political,
yeah, but they'll get a lot of that back. Let's not forget that, we'll get 60% of that back.
let me get James because we haven't.
not,
Yeah, just
not
two-
for the
two things.
schematic of the other, if we don't build B3, we won't get any of the money back for B3.
Yes, we will, we asked that question, they said, yes, you will.
So clearly, this is
Hold
irrelevant
on.
until we can get clarity on that for next meeting. That's something that we could really address at the next meeting, once we get that clear notice on that.
Right.
Because then we'll be able to discuss it with a more clear head and a more clearer picture where we're going with it. Secondly, quickly, I know we want to move on. Was there a desire to create a procurement subcommittee tonight, or is that something we're gonna postpone also, or?
I would like
If
to.
that's the case, I think we should, do that to get that moving forward and do something productive.
Excellent. Excellent.
Can I just ask one quick question?
Yeah.
Is it possible to get somebody from SBAC or whatever the thing is and get them in here and just answer the questions?
MSBA.
They come as it's not impossible, and they will come.
And just clean up all this?
Right.
Yeah, because we got to get on the same page.
It's not impossible, and we can ask, but they usually come as a whole team. They bring the legal people, they bring this person, they bring that person, because they don't say anything without conferring.
We're better off having defined questions and asking to get them in writing. And the third question we're gonna have is, if we go different than the B3, which is the previously preferred project, will we still get reimbursed for that work that was done?
And that's the last item you guys were debating.
That's right, so there's 3 items we need clarification on.
Because we got to get the answer,
Yep.
whether
And
it's.
there's new information, so it's
Yeah.
not the same set of facts that we would.
And the rules have changed, they've changed the process.
Right, everything's different.
Maybe we could conference them, do a conference call with them so they didn't have to.
Only if
come
it's during the
down.
daytime.
Only during the day.
But I think the emails, they're very responsive
They're very
to whether
responsive,
Mike
put
is
it in
emailed or
writing, they
this,
need a
you
few
know.
days to deal with it, they won't
Yeah, I
give
know
us
the
stuff
guy
in a
in
public
Sullivan's.
meeting off the cuff.
What we do is we email them the questions in advance.
Yeah.
They have time to have all their interdepartmental meetings, and then you set up a time to conference call with them and clear it up.
Okay.
And if you were able to get them down here, John, the same thing holds true. They want you to have defined the exact questions before and don't ask any extras.
Dick got yelled at.
You have seen it.
Been there, done that.
So how do we create the procurement
Small
committee?
government.
That,
You
I
need
don't
a
know.
motion or for procurement committee? Just the chair,
I think we just nominate people.
chairman nominate or
Who wants to be on a procurement committee?
Yes.
I mean,
any,
I don't know how to nominate, so this is new to me, but I would nominate Dave Zedatoff to be on the procurement committee.
are you willing to serve, Dave?
Yes.
Excellent. So we have a motion, a nomination, and we have a second.
Second.
All right, all in favor of Dave being on the procurement committee, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
But you wouldn't be
No.
on?
You can be on
I
it even
think
if
the
you're not a
business
voting
manager
member.
needs to be on it, whether it's Patrick for the next
Okay,
few days.
I agree.
Or Peter. I nominate the assistant superintendent for business and finance.
Whoever that may be, so whether it's Pat or Peter. So we had a nomination to second.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? No?
Well,
Okay, great.
I'd
That's
like to-
unanimous.
I'd like to nominate James O'Brien for that.
Second.
All right, I got a nomination, a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor for James, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Say no. Now, does that, you're not officially a voting member.
He can
Does that
represent.
impact?
He can represent this, this.
Okay, just
But
want
he
to make
can
sure.
represent our committee.
Good.
If we want
Yeah.
to do so.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Live in Pat, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, just don't want
Do
to break
that.
any laws.
Anybody in this side of the table want to get involved?
How many do you need?
I'd like to see 4 people.
Yeah, I nominate Dan.
More than that.
Well, Dan, you've been involved in procurements before, right?
A little bit, not a lot.
So that's more than most of us. so.
You've been on the Building Stabilization Fund Committee, or
Building
Building
Study
Study Committee. Yeah, I nominate,
All right.
did somebody already nominate Dan?
We got a nomination, how about
I
a
second your nomination.
All right, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Dan? Aye. Opposed? No. All right, so we got 4. Fantastic.
And I would suggest that their first order of work be to, A, just develop their own policies as to how they want the committee to go forward, but B, to put some focus on the OPM piece, the module
The scope of
2,
work.
the scope of work for the, and the RFP for the OPM, which is online. We need to
Very
start
easy.
with the state piece and then tailor that to what the needs are here for the community.
Excellent.
Great, good.
So, I'm still worried about this number. When do you need to know, when does this committee need to come up with a number that we'll ask at town meeting?
I don't necessarily see the committee need to do that. I think we just need to administratively find out what it is and we put it on the warrant. I mean, right now, that's what I'm proposing right now. If we find out information that that's not going to be sufficient from our conversations with MSBA, then we'll deal with it.
Because it's different than how we write it, whether it's raise and appropriate or
Correct.
borrow.
Correct.
Right, so,
So I'd prefer to do the raise and appropriate because we have it
yeah.
than to borrow, but actually, we'd write it both ways, just in case there was ever a snafu. But I would prefer to always use money on hand versus borrowing money if we can avoid it.
They've got language in here too, you know.
And she sent us stuff last week with that email, so, you know, we've got the language. On the other side of the email that has a number on it, is what the proposed article would be and the motion, and then we just need to tailor it to what our needs are, and then they get to review our motion before it goes into get approved.
And that takes about 5 days. So I'm just trying to back from
Mhm.
town meeting because, so we have to talk to her this week. At least email her the questions, and then she'll tell us when we can talk to her. And then we would then determine whether it's raise and appropriate or permission to borrow. Then we need to get that into them, and their legal team will take them 3 to 4 or 5 days. I mean, sometimes they'll rush things for you.
So
but-
maybe tomorrow afternoon, you and I can get together and just frame these 3 questions, we'll email them off, and then I'll get that ball rolling.
Yep.
And then, I know you run the numbers, you guys run the numbers, but does, as a legislative body here, does the elementary school building committee have to put our stamp on it? As a trust? That's what I'm concerned about too, with the democratic process.
I think it should be proposed by the school building committee. I mean, to be, that we're all on board with it, you know.
It seems in the time frame you're talking that by our next meeting on the 2nd, that there would be more clarity to that. And we'd at least be able to address it with a different
As long as we don't
outlook.
have to print the warrant before then.
No, we don't. So, but what I'll do is I'll use that to get the ball rolling if that's acceptable by the 290. And that's where I got the number from. That's how the 290 is. We were talking a lower number with MSBA, but they also put a lot of emphasis on making sure we had a buffer in there. This money isn't spent unless it's needed, but it gives us the authorization to spend it, and we're not borrowing money based upon these figures. If we find out new information from MSBA that we have to up that, then we'll address that.
So the other thing they're gonna ask us is, this is also depending on town meeting voted to reconfigure the stabilization fund?
No. This is just a straight release of the 290. That's a separate piece. This has nothing to do with that.
Do we have permission to release it before, I'm just asking questions, before the town, because are you talking about the big stabilization fund or the building
The
stabilization?
building stabilization fund, the town meeting has the authorization to release that money.
So you're saying, what if they don't?
Yeah,
Oh, if they don't release the money, if town meeting decides we're not gonna give anybody any money for the project,
going
then,
anywhere
you know,
anyway.
then, we're gonna be meeting every 2 weeks and just.
but what I'm saying, be careful, we'd have to do one before the other is my point. So first they have to release the money before we can
Oh.
vote to spend it.
In the order of the warrant articles. Okay.
That's just my point, yeah.
John Carter.
So we're just saying that this 290 is just simply the 580 we have sitting in the stabilization fund divided by 2. Half is for the fire and police, and half is for this.
Right.
Plus $100,000 we have left over from the other schematic design, so we're talking 390?
Correct.
Okay, so 390, it'd be better to have an argument, not just that number divided by 2. More like, I'm gonna do 3 feasibility studies. What did I spend on my first one? If it was 2, and you don't have to do as much, then the 400,000 seems about right. So more behind this number at town meeting than just what's in the fund divided by 2.
We'll put that together.
Plus it's, and schematic.
Yep, plus the 100,000.
No. Plus a whole full schematic design for the preferred option.
It has to be approved.
So it's not just what we have left over in schematic. We actually have to fund the amount it takes to do a complete schematic design for a new project if we don't go forward with B3. But that has to be communicated too. I know you didn't like it, but it's an if-then. If we go forward with B3, it might cost us this money. If we go forward with a whole new project, it will probably cost us this much money.
And then we just come back at another town meeting and just resolve that. Worst case is maybe if we can't have the number in place to satisfy the July deadline, what's the next deadline?
The next deadline, I knew somebody would ask me, so I brought it. So the next deadline is Thursday, August 7th, for the Wednesday, September 24th, MSBA meeting.
We'll have clarification on this pretty quick.
Okay.
All right, so good job, everybody. I think we talked that out really well, so let's keep going. And again, you've said this before, Mike, Liz, I mean, the fact that we have some wiggle room is a testament to Liz and all the work you've done to be organized and get it done early, because now it's not, like the last deadline is not this July 30th meeting. We got some options where, God forbid, but we do have to push it down the line, so hopefully.
Our only deadline is getting money.
That's right.
So it's
So
either
we're
a
working
regular
this,
town meeting
yeah,
now,
I see what
or
you're
a
saying.
special town meeting in the fall.
Okay, so good job, kudos to everybody here. So now we are at number 6. I'm a little bit behind, but I'm not, no pressure. And we have Sarah Stearns. She's gonna facilitate the next 2 topics, brainstorming questions to be answered regarding site selection, and then the pros and cons. So we'll just hand it over to Sarah Stearns.
Okay. As far as the brainstorming questions to be answered, I don't really have anything prepared, but I thought it would be good for the committee, just to kind of get everything in one place, the multitude of questions that we're trying to answer, just to put it out there and be organized about it. So I thought maybe everyone can contribute 1 or 2 things that have been rattling around and, kind of rate them most important things that we need to nail down initially, and down to the details. But I mean, I think this exercise can be pretty brief because we all know what the issues are. namely where and how will we build the elementary school. How are we gonna get to the point, how are we gonna figure out where we're putting it, will it fit, you know, kind of just go through all those questions fairly briefly and get them, kind of get them all down. So I thought maybe we could just go around the table and, or anyone can just kind of pitch in. A lot of these questions have come up repeatedly, even tonight, over and over, so, if anyone wants to just throw something out there, we can
I'll
record
get
them.
started there. I think there were three key things that were driving the locations that need to be answered. And the first one had to do with water and sewer, and I think we've got some clarification on that, but it still needs to be answered by the engineers. The second is, as the superintendent's brought up, what is the future of the middle high school? If, my recollection of the last meeting was that if we don't invest in that building and maintain it, then we're going to be in a position where we have to build a new middle high school in the very near future. So, to me, that drives that there has to be investment in the building to maintain that, but the question is, what if that's not done? Where's the new middle high school going to be built? So that's a question that needs to be done. I think the other piece is that when you start to look at the connection, if you had on a 100-acre campus, you had an elementary school and you had a middle high school, is what's the interaction between those two facilities? Can you design that so that they're separate and distinct, so you don't have to worry about old kids being with young kids? Or is that gonna happen just because of the 100-acre site that you're on? I think that needs to be discussed as part of the
Yeah, I think both
sites
of
for there,
those.
that those are big obstacles that need to be addressed, either positively or negatively.
I agree. Anyone else have anything to add?
Well, I would like to see I'm sorry, John, I just want to say this. I really would like to see the numbers in kind of a columnar way. Mr. Ward said, column A, column B, column C, because that's going to drive a lot of my thoughts as a taxpayer. I mean, I'm a father, but I'm a taxpayer, and I want it to be done the best that it can be done, but at the best price. So, I mean, I would love to see that. All these numbers running around my head, I want to see that laid out, so that would be something I'd like to.
Right, I mean, as our committee, our main charge, as I see it, is to come up with the best long-term economically feasible plan that we can get for the best price. That was the big issue past two times. So just getting to that point, I sort of feel like questions just keep coming up, and I think those are excellent points that continually come up, talking about this new alternative at the middle high school campus.
I'll let you facilitate.
Okay, John.
Thank you.
I think whatever project we pick, it has to be, we have to have, this is my own personal opinion, we have to have the ability to get a GMP price on it. In other
What does
words,
that mean?
guaranteed maximum price out of the gate. So that's the number, and that's the number. So when we talk to the taxpayer and those people in that little camera, as Mr. Ward says, we can look at them straight in the eye and say, this is the number not to exceed, no matter what. So it's a fixed number and guaranteed maximum price, and that's very doable. The other thing I would also, I think is very important to, when we're looking at sites and so on, is to look at what is the real true long-term cost of running these buildings. I mean, I think that will play a very big role. It's not just what does it cost today, what does it cost on a daily basis, a yearly basis, long-term. Because sometimes, in the end, something that's a little bit more money today, overall, is a lot less money on a 20-year run or whatever the lifespan is. Those are a couple things. I don't see why we can't get a GMP. It's done all the time. So those are my two suggestions.
But something's been conveyed to me about, from emergency management, is, which I don't have any concerns about, but they did, is this is not in the zone and that is in the zone. And so there's a whole procedure they go through for managing
What do you mean by zone?
The nuclear power,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sorry, I should say that.
Well, you get that calendar every year, and you see Route 58, right down the middle, everything to the east of it is in the nuclear zone, they got an evacuation plan, everything to the west of it is
Right.
not in the zone, there's no,
Magic
no plan.
wall.
Yeah,
So, all that is very arbitrary, you know.
Exactly.
I don't think
I don't
it,
feel any safer here than I would.
no, but it's their whole protocol. You know, they're looking for a place, they have their wash down facilities and all this kind of stuff, and that's here. Like, I don't know where they're gonna do it, but supposedly that's here. So that was a concern that was raised to me by emergency management is how, the other thing that parents, there is a, you know, every day I get a few more calls about how will you keep the children separate from the high school
I think it's a good
students,
question.
but not just because not mixing with them, because sometimes that can be kind of good, having them read to the kids and things like that, but, traffic really worries them.
Kids, high school kids driving.
Traffic here too.
Yeah. Yeah, that was, traffic was a concern at both sides, but these are two questions that have come to me.
Mhm. Well, it was a couple of years ago, just as an example, maybe 5 years ago, there was a student who went on a drive out of control around the high school campus. He left the road, he went onto the sports fields, and it's a miracle nobody was hit. So, I mean, that's just a real-life example of something that happened in
CNN,
Carver.
Dukes of Carver,
Yeah, he
is
was,
what they call them.
and kids were scattering everywhere, and that was at the
Soccer.
teenage level, you know, let alone the little ones in elementary school, if that were ever to happen. So, I mean, these aren't far-fetched things, obviously it's very rare, but you do have to think about those things.
I think also the presence of a resource officer is, you know, the goal is, should be very helpful to have that presence there, and not to, again, sway either way, but as a one campus presence, there's a benefit to that person being able to be at all points at that time, almost a safer situation, because you're gonna deter those kind of situations like that, with that presence there at that one site all the time, you know?
And then on the converse, I mean, yeah, the resource officer may be added, but what about when it disappears in financial crunches? So all of a sudden we build this structure because of that, as a positive, and then 5 years, 10 years down the line, the resource officer's eliminated again.
We're developing a sustainable financial budget for Carver. We're never
Excellent.
gonna have financial issues in the
I
future.
love it, I love it. I appreciate that.
With that-
Oh, I think we're catching my eye. Okay. I mean, I think those are all good points that are just coming up over and over, and I know I'm hearing stuff like that around town in my circle, my peers, and concerns about, having everyone on one site potentially, and, keeping it separate. I mean, there's arguments all over the place on both ideas, so, I just would like to be able to respond appropriately, and that we're talking about this, and we're discussing all of these questions and issues that are coming up around town, so.
Maybe what we should think about doing is having these things weighted. You kind of rank them in order of priority, because I don't want to focus on any one of them because I think they're all important, but one of them, just may have more impact on our decision process, and that one should be ranked number one, because we have to figure out solutions to solve that, whereas item number 6 is a nice to have, and, short of financial issues, it would always work. So that we're not having a list of 40, we may have a list of 40, but the one at the top is worth 3 points, and the one down the bottom is worth half a point. Now, again, we're not gonna get into ranking them with an order of magnitude component to them, but I think in order of preference, it may start to help frame some of the things, so that we start to focus our attention on finding solutions for the key items, to determine whether or not they have a solution. Take the emergency response. Does that have a solution? It may not. But, where does that rank on our list?
So the action item is to rank these, basically, the 8 questions that came up.
Oh,
Well,
I think
there's
that's more
gonna
than
be
8.
more, yeah, there'll be a
Yeah.
lot.
For now, though, we have 8 right now.
So let's wait till we get, my suggestion would be to wait till we get a pretty bunch of laundry lists, because some of the questions will evolve as we are finding out stuff during a feasibility study.
So from a communications aspect, if we're asked these questions by the public, do we answer them with, we're working to figure out the best solution? I mean,
That's what feasibility is for.
Yeah,
we're waiting until
dial in all of
feasibility,
the
we are still in
information.
very beginning phase. I just wanna make sure we're all always sharing the same message, we're
Right.
in the very beginning phases, we don't really have an answer yet for you, but we will to these questions that get asked, cause it doesn't sound like we really have a lot of answers to them yet.
Mr. Ward?
I was thinking about how would somebody like myself simplify it so that I could see everything fairly clearly. And as Barry brought up the 3 columns idea, and and you could prioritize some of the things that are factors that we have to consider in the process. And I think there's quite a few more. I mean, if you're looking at the expense of the construction, do we have a way to, if we don't have, an exact price for the schools that could be built on the 2 sites at the high school versus here, are they gonna be the same amount of money? I mean, I'm looking, there's a huge difference. I'm looking, Liz told me we can use the foundations and footings here. So on my way home, I'm thinking, I'm a farmer. Concrete, this building's 40 years old. Footings, foundations, and then 64 years old over there. So I talked to a friend that's a carpenter, he said, well, no. He said, because the hangers and the rebar and everything else will be totally different. Now I'm saying, all right, now that's an additional huge expense of tearing footings and concrete foundations out and getting rid of them. And then if you're picturing the front building with the brick facade, we're just gonna keep that because those classrooms are too small, the corridors are too narrow. We gotta rebuild all of that. So that means tearing all those footings and foundations out and keep the facade intact so that we can, so I'm just looking at what are the expenses here versus clearing the land over there. I know I talked to a land clearer and he said $4,500 to $5,000 to cut the trees, stump it, chip it. And so you're talking 12 acres, you're talking 60,000 could be. And if you put it on the ball fields, you wouldn't have that expense, but then you'd have the expense of clearing land to put new ball fields. So, I mean, are those some of the factors that we need to be throwing in here? And then I'm looking and thinking about the cost that you're gonna project to move the kids around or have some temporary facilities or how, and what's the cost of the loss of education to a kid like me who would be watching the bulldozers all day, or something. So
overall disruption.
yeah, disruption, John. Yeah.
So
And,
some of those costs are, not some of them, all of those costs are in the feasibility and schematic
Mhm.
for B3, but of course not for,
Yeah. So how do we do a comparison?
we just draw them out of there and you can put them side by side.
Well, what Mr. Ward, I think, is bringing up is a great point, is that as we go through looking at these questions that need to be answered, is to keep it objective. So how do we keep it objective? Every time there's a negative something for one site, we have to almost have another column as here's possible mitigation to offset that. So we can get back to comparing apples and oranges. I'm sorry, apples to apples. What we don't want to do is start to throw these negatives out about this site, but there's a quick fix to it versus the other way.
You don't want to favor one site without having all the answers.
Exactly, and just whatever gets put on the paper, and I guess this is my suggestion, Sarah, is that you do have some remark component is, here's possible mitigation, here's possible solutions to offset that
Yeah.
issue. Now, that offset component could have a cost to it, and that's okay,
Yeah.
but you put it in there, but it's a monetary example right there, or it's layout design where you're not sharing parking and you're, you know, having two separate parking lots and two separate entrances, so you don't have young kids, old kids driving in cars different ways. I mean, those are the types of things we have to start to put into the remarks as you go through that analysis, to add another column
Right.
to look at, to equalize it, to make it objective.
So but first, we just have to get all the questions we want to
Right.
answer, and then we
Yeah,
can,
yeah.
then we can put all this stuff.
Whole bunch of them.
So do we do that for our next meeting, come up with a series of questions to maybe send over you
And rate them.
and rate them?
How about if the whole, each of us does that, comes up with questions we need answered? What do you think? Is that doable?
And do you want to
Yeah.
email them to Sarah
Yeah,
prior, or?
I'm happy to compile it if that's acceptable. I mean, everyone can just email me or,
There's a really good way to do consensus voting. So if you ever worked with me on a hiring committee, is once we get the total number of questions, things we want to answer, what's the most important to the whole group? Usually, so you assign a certain number of points. And so if Barry wants question 4, 5, and 6 to be the most important ones, he can distribute his points evenly there. And then you find out from the whole group, and then you can work with that to, you know, it's very clear, it pops out immediately. What's just the most important to the whole group? And that's, you know, just by everybody privately rating them. And then you can come down and decide which one goes before that one in a discussion. But it's a real good method to get a group consensus.
So Liz, should we use that at the end of feasibility before we go into schematic to make that final decision?
I think we can use it all along
Yeah.
for, you know, a lot of things. You know, for instance, when we were hiring Pat, we started off with 45 candidates, ended up with, you know, 6 interviews. And in the finals, we only had 2, and so I gave everybody, you know, 5 points. And then it was very clear, wasn't it, James? Immediately, we knew what was the most important because everybody put the same person as the one that they wanted.
I think that's a great
Happened
way.
for Pat, too.
I mean, we have a big group, and that's a great way to capture the body instead of, you know, some of us are
You
quieter.
can talk
and some-
forever
Yeah, so,
on things.
right, well, the
That type
questions
of-
just keep coming
mhm,
Yeah,
literally
so
out of
the
the woodwork.
consensus voting can serve you very well when you're trying to make a group
that's
decision.
good.
Okay.
Sarah, do you want to send us out a form as to how you want these submitted to you? Maybe an Excel sheet or something and put some columns?
Sure, I can do that. I mean, so we're basically talking about a renovation option, or specifically B3, at this site, a new school option, new building option at this site, and a new building option at the high school site.
Right, and
I mean,
the
are
one
we
thing-
talking about B3 specifically, or just
It has to be
a reno-
through,
okay.
we can't go back and redo that.
We've gone through that
Well,
process.
it could be a renovation project.
Right,
Yeah. So you got a renovation project and 2 new building projects.
Right,
Yeah.
those are
Those are
the
the
three.
those are your 3
Right, right.
things. Yeah.
Those are the 3 that
But-
we're talking about, just to boil it down to.
Location and where they can be on the campuses, that'll adjust.
right.
Yeah, okay.
At the DEP thing, they did rule out using the town water, is that right?
Yeah, that was actually determined before.
Yeah, that was
even-
determined in town that there's not enough capacity in the
Here.
well
I just,
that we have down
that's
there.
a
Yeah.
question I came out there, did we answer that question yet?
Oh,
To be
yeah.
here is a new building?
No, to use the well by the library that feeds the town hall
Oh, even on the
complexes.
even on the
We're gonna
rent.
run that to the fire station, and that isn't a big draw of water, but it doesn't have any more capacity to put a school on that well.
Yeah, I just wanna make sure that
Yeah.
question got out there.
Yeah,
because
because
I didn't-
that question was posed at the last meeting, and yeah, so that one's absolutely ruled out.
Okay, then I don't need to answer
But
that.
based on your, the cluster well concept, could they have done something similar to that over there?
Not
No,
over there.
because there's too many buildings within the IWPA.
Correct. We can't control an open area over there. Here we can, the middle high school we can, by putting the wells further away from the buildings.
All right, so that's a good action plan. All right, any other topics, Sarah? We still doing?
I mean, it could go on and on,
Merging these together?
but, I mean, we can go right into the pros and cons on the.
I think we need more questions, right?
Yeah, I think so too.
Tonight?
Till we get more, yeah.
Okay, so everyone's going to email me their, I mean, do you wanna say like top 5, or just everything, whatever comes to mind? whatever works.
Some people give you 5, some will give you 40.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing, it could be an infinite list.
So
you-
I'll
could-
email you our top questions and then
Yeah,
we'll
could we,
rate them.
a little clarity on the, like, these are all posed as questions, I mean, what's the,
Because we don't have too many answers yet.
right?
And then we can make a list of concerns and things, we have some questions about that. This is like, what do we need to answer before we can make a decision? That just seems pretty basic, you know?
So the way of thinking about it is at town meeting is that we have everybody jump up to ask questions. We want to have all those answers ahead of time as to how we made our decisions. So anything that you think a taxpayer is going to ask really is what we should be covering, anything that's
That's a good way to put
legitimate,
it.
that falls within our purview to figure out how to do that. You know, we're not going to answer questions on how you're going to educate the kids, because that's an academic issue. We're answering questions on a structure to support academics. We're going to build a facility that's going to have a long life value to the community and hopefully not have high operational costs. But then you get into the detail that we want to have answered and studied.
And then we got a great list of questions from Mr. Pratt, so make sure you take a sheet home with you, and if you haven't had it already. So that's a great starting point. All right. What's next? Are you good? You got more?
Yeah, I'm good, so everyone has my email.
All right. So was that a combo pros and cons and brainstorm, or?
Well, if anybody wants to discuss any specific pros and cons that we kind of touched on at like 10:30 last week, or last time,
Yeah.
I would be happy to edit, add, or whatever to that list. Again, I mean, these two issues in my mind sort of dovetail. You know, it comes down to what works at one site, what doesn't work at the other site, and how one thing offsets the other. So, I mean, I'm happy to run through that spreadsheet, or
I think as we ask the questions and then find the answers, they can be sorted into,
yeah, I see a lot of spreadsheets in my future.
And can we use, like, when we're coming up with our questions, if you refer to the pros and cons worksheet, that we got a hard copy last time, so that'd be a great resource as well.
Yeah, and I have the updated, we added a few things, tweaked a few things on the projector last week, so I have the updated version that we can work from moving forward.
Yeah, that's right, that's right. Would you be able to distribute that to us, please? Pretty,
Yeah, I mean, I think we can probably can we email, or do we have to present it at the
no,
hearing?
email.
information.
Yeah.
Information we can
Yeah.
distribute.
We just don't discuss it online.
All right, so, does that, you satisfied with that? I don't want to cut you short. I'm very impressed with it. How do you feel?
Well, I think it's a good thing for the committee to address as a group, because, you know, everyone's talking about it, so.
Oh, yeah, out in the town?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
I think it's a very public issue, it should be, and we should be able to speak candidly about it, and that we are discussing it as a committee,
Yeah.
so.
I agree. Everywhere I go, that's what people are talking about, and I'm sure you all run into it too, whatever, you know, wherever you are throughout the day, so.
Yeah.
That's great, that's great. All right, so thank you, Sarah. And next on the list, we have a topic called Who is the Carver Contact for MSBA? And so, you know, because I think this is an important topic. In the first meeting, we kind of said Liz is going to be the contact. So I want to reaffirm that, because we, you know, to keep it all us all on the same page. How does everybody feel about that? I mean, it's good to have that one point person.
No, I agree, a one-person contact with the MSBA is a good idea to come and share the message. I mean, to me, it doesn't matter who, I just think one person is a good idea.
Yeah, I agree too.
Yeah,
I
cuts
think
down
that
on the-
streamlines the
I need to have
process.
it clarified, because what happens if anybody else calls them, no matter who it is, they call me immediately and ask me. So, I think they're looking for clarity, because they usually, you know, get questions from one source or multiple people sitting in a conference call in a room, which is, you know, a really good way to share the information with everybody.
Because I have called Diane Sullivan about a communications question, I wanted her
That's
help with
different.
wording something.
Yeah.
And she was great, her and I worked it out together, but,
Yeah. No, this is like questions that they don't want the same person calling them, asking, will this be reimbursed, will that be reimbursed? You know, I mean, 5 different people asking the same question, that's,
gotcha.
They have a lot of other schools they're helping as well.
yeah. We'd be lucky enough.
What was the previous contact for Carver before? So you on the previous committee?
Yeah.
You were the main person?
They ask the superintendent in every district to do it.
Okay.
Because there are things that no one else knows, like how many children are in that room, and, you know, so.
John?
What's the town manager's role in that, in that
Town
contact?
administrator,
Town administrator.
Yeah.
usually
don't know.
because it's,
I don't-
just
I've never-
because it's a school building, I know of only one other town that didn't use the superintendent, and they used the building committee chair. Because there was a huge transition between superintendents, you know, going on.
I mean,
An
most of
interim,
us,
then a
most of us
this
are
one.
neophyte, that's why I'm asking.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's appropriate for the superintendent to be the official point of contact, but if I have questions, because I have to deal with the financial side, then I put my calls in and ask the questions, and, you know, have them filter all the questions back through an email that is written to the superintendent. And we make it work.
Should your questions, though, if we have one point of contact, go to Liz and she asks if Liz is our contact, to have it still be that one
If it's
communications
something to
person?
get official in writing, like tomorrow Liz and I will meet to go over these 3 questions, and that's appropriate. But I sometimes need to do my own analysis on certain things and talk to people, which I will do. And that's just part of what I have to do to represent the town side of this interest.
So we really have 2 contacts then?
No, we have one official, and she's speaking on behalf of the committee. Just like anyone can call up, but the only person that they're required to do official correspondence with is with the superintendent.
But I copy everything to him that I send him, so.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah. We're counting on
We'll
both
make it
of you.
work.
Your expertise in both your fields, we're counting on it. So, yeah, just to cut down on any unnecessary redundancy. So that's excellent. I don't think we need to vote on that. Sounds like everyone's agreeable. And then last but not least, I mean, we are getting down here. We're looking to be on time. I want to come up, this is not really last, so don't be alarmed, everybody. I do have the upcoming dates proposed. We've been doing great with the every other week system, and I'd like to keep going with that. The next one would be June 2nd. However, after that, you know, the next 2-week period is June 16th, which is town meeting. So we're not gonna have a conflict, we don't wanna have a conflict there. So I was hoping to start our committee's meetings up again the following Monday. So it would be June 23rd, and then we could continue with the bi-weekly meetings.
Does that create a conflict though, John? Didn't you guys move your meetings?
Yeah, I'm all supportive of having meetings when we need to have them, as they're starting to get work done.
Yeah,
I would almost propose we don't do the 2nd, we do the 9th. And the reason for that, it gives us an extra week or 2 for Dave to do some of his analysis, for us to get our information back from MSBA. And then on the 9th, it'll be just before town meeting, we can wrap up everything and have more information in our hands.
We could
So-
meet that week, but we couldn't meet the 9th because that's school committee meeting,
On the 9th, Monday the 9th?
that's right, the second Monday,
Monday.
that's right.
Can we meet that Wednesday, maybe the 11th?
Yeah, we have the mobilizing the community. It gets ridiculous after a while.
Yeah, that's why I was a fan of this every other week thing on Monday, because it was just, we all knew where we were gonna be. If I'm out, I'm out, you know, that's the way it is. But if any one of us is out, that's the way it is. But every other Monday was great. It
Dave,
was.
do you feel pressured to have stuff by the 2nd?
No, I mean, I can come up with what I need to by the 2nd.
Okay.
And we know he never says no.
He's a good.
And I'd be happy with the information you get, I trust it, you know, so I really, the second.
Which the 9th just doesn't work, just because
Yeah.
of the school committee.
But if you need to change the 23rd because of FinCom, we could change that one, you know. Once school gets out, there's no problem with the evenings.
Yeah,
Unless you have little kids.
I know, but I meant it's conflicting with other
Right.
meetings.
right. So why don't we, what do you say?
No, so are we gonna keep these dates then?
But does the 23rd conflict with your FinCom?
We're gonna have the town meeting, FinCom kinda takes a week or so off, so 23rd's fine. On the 2nd, I can always make my meeting, maybe the 3rd or the 4th, they're pretty flexible. So I can do these dates.
Okay.
All right. So, no vote needed there, but just wanted to get us,
What's the school committee's meeting in July?
We don't need.
no meeting in July.
You take off 1 month.
Right, because you got the 7th, that's right at the 4th of July weekend. And I'm trying to think that in case we need something a last-minute meeting in the 28th, right before the 31st, the 30th meeting with MSBA. Do we want to maybe move those to the 14th and 28th versus 7th and 21st?
I can't.
Or do we even need 2 meetings in July?
I won't be able to do the 28th.
I won't be able to do the 21st, so.
I won't be the 21st either.
So I think we just gotta get a pattern in if we can get as many people here as possible. We've been pretty lucky so far.
If we needed to have a second one, we could pick another night.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I don't think during the summer, you're ever gonna get everybody in no matter what you do.
Yeah.
Because people have vacations,
Right.
and things
You
are
get
already
me.
scheduled.
No, right. You're paying me to be here.
Why don't we just keep it the way it's listed and then reevaluate on the 7th as to where we need to go
No, I
that
agree,
week?
yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just check in.
That's good, yeah.
Yeah.
Because when we're here on June 2nd, we can reevaluate and, with more information, more news, we can get a better idea
Yeah.
for the long term. So definitely June 2nd. That's a go.
It's fine.
Let's stay a little longer, it's raining.
Proposed unless
and-
otherwise noted.
Oh, hold on, what's that, James?
I said proposed unless otherwise noted for these
Okay.
dates that are there.
Awesome. So no need to vote, though. We'll just go, because I'm setting as chairman, I'm setting the
Boss,
agenda.
you
I
set the
know,
dates.
I know.
Trash.
All right, I just wanted to, we're not adjourning yet, folks, but we're close. I did want to tell you something. John Carter did some legwork, too, about it, possibly inviting a retired superintendent. So that's something I'd like to schedule, one of these future meetings. So we're going to keep in touch with him.
This is the Rockland.
Yeah.
Yes, he was very open to coming and talking to us. He even put together almost like a procedural document that I think Bridgewater's following, going through their process because they were so successful.
So when we do coordinate it, we just have to make sure we have enough time to put it on the agenda.
Sure.
So even if he could have come to this week, I think by the time we knew, it was too late for the
We
agenda.
have to post it on the Thursday before we meet if we meet on a Monday,
Yeah.
48 hours working Thursday.
Okay. And then I want the public a chance to speak if they would like to. But before that, any last minute thoughts from the committee?
I was going through this book, a lot of meat to it. I couldn't find the statement of interest. Is that in here?
The statement of interest is not in there. If you want a copy of the statement of interest, it's online.
It's on mine.
Yeah. It's like this,
That's a good link for the fact sheet too, probably. Where is it online?
under the school building project.
Okay.
On the school, I should be more specific, on the school website.
You can sum a 12-page document up to 3 words. If you want their money, follow the rules.
Yeah, you gotta follow those rules. All right, anyone else from the committee? 'Cause we have a couple of citizens, so I don't know if anybody wanted to say anything. Steve Pratt, you can come on up somewhere.
Can we come up or can I
Unless,
stay?
you could stay there,
It's
Frank.
okay, I usually have a pretty good voice.
Frank can zoom in on you.
Everybody-
And we have I don't know, this is our rule for going forward, just a 5-minute deadline.
Okay.
That's all.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, the Collins Center report is on the town's website. It's under the Board of Selectmen's landing page. It's very bottom. You see North Carver Water District, and then the elementary school, and the Collins Center report is already out there. The second thing I want to talk about is the water. And one of the things, we looked at was, bringing water from town, well, question is, why can't we look at bringing water from North Carver? It's only 2.5 miles from the North Carver Water Station. We're gonna do a big Route 58 project to put sidewalks in and like that. Why can't we bring water to this site? And I did talk to Jack Hunter about it, because ultimately, we may have to do that to take care of the Crystal Lake problem, which they cannot use. So if we bring water down to West Street, they've gotta go past the elementary school. So that's something we should really look at, and if we look at it as an investment in the infrastructure for the future, that's another option. If we have a public water supply outside of the property, that's another whole factor. The third thing is, I really encourage every member to become intimate with the MSBA website. You have to know all of the modules. You have to know the feasibility study, schematic design, the project and scope. Because when we were trying to do this, I know it sounds horrible, 4 years ago, it always came back and haunting us because we tried to follow this path, and then every time we went to town meeting, we got a thumbs up, and every time we went to the voters, we got a, I don't know, thumbs down, I guess. So everybody really needs to understand, and unless the feasibility vote has changed, there's specific votes under here that talk about the feasibility study. It doesn't mention schematic design per se. It talks about the OPM coming up with a schematic report on the preferred plan, but it only talks about feasibility. It doesn't talk about applying for schematic. And the building with us talks about all the modules. Really important to understand each component and how they intertwine, and how you can't really, you can't do the next one until the MSBA says you can do the next one. So you don't want to get ahead of yourself either. The only other thing that I want to caution on is we have to be certain that when we go to the voters, we have the right project in the right place and the right cost. Because we can't afford another 5 years. You guys have worked so hard. Liz has spent, I hate to say this, 8 years almost, trying to get...
Fully 8 years.
What's that?
Fully 8 years.
Fully 8 years. Trying to get this, and we deserve it. We deserve it not just to the current students and the current staff, but the future students. We have to come up with the right plan this time to sell. Because if we don't, we're gonna be sitting here 5 years from now and saying, oh, what do we need to do? And I don't think any of us wants to go through that again. And, we've all spent, individually and collectively, so much of our time. It's 9:15. I know there's lots of things everybody else would like to be doing. But I think all of us have taken this so seriously over these last, for Liz, 8 years. For some of us, newbies, it's only been 4 or 5 years. But it's still just cumulatively an enormous amount of effort. And we just can't take the risk this time of doing it wrong. So that's all I really want to say, and thank you for the time.
Thanks for coming here, Steve, I appreciate it. And Andrew? All right, so believe it or not, we are right on time. A miracle has happened. So I have one more motion I need.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Adjourn, a second? All in favor? Say aye. Opposed, none. All right.